Good morning. Happy New Year. Welcome to the January 10th, 2023 HPB meeting. We have an important but short agenda today. I'll quickly review our meeting procedures to maintain our efficiency and decorum here. We're going to have the staff present items and describe the staff recommendations. Then the staff will field questions from the board if we need any clarification on the item or their recommendations. Then we'll go ahead and ask the applicants to come forward, make their presentations in a limited time, and then sit down. After that, the board can present questions to the applicant. We'll ask that the board put out all their questions together, and then we'll invite the applicant to come back and answer any questions all at once. We want to just avoid the kind of back and forth. And then after those questions, the applicant can sit down again. We'll go ahead and go through disclosures. We'll open public hearing. We'll ask for anyone in the public, either in the room or on Zoom, to come forward. At that point, the applicant will have a chance for rebuttal. And then we'll get to our board member comment one by one, ending with the chair. After board comment, we'll see if we can get some motions and move these items along. So with that, I'll hand it over to Debbie.
Good morning, members of the board, members of the public. Thank you for attending our January 10th meeting of the Historic Preservation Board. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a big thank you to both Nancy Liebman and Kirk Pascal. We very much appreciate your service. You have both been on the board for 6 years and 1 month because you have carried over. So I wanted to express my appreciation for you both attending. Your terms did officially end at the end of December. So Happy New Year to all of the board members, and we're going to miss you, but I'm sure we'll see both of you in one capacity or another. With that, I am going to turn it over to Nick Claridges from the City Attorney's Office, who will read the notice regarding lobbyist registration and swear in any members of the public wishing to testify today.
Thank you, Debbie, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Today's meeting of the Historic Preservation Board will be conducted in a hybrid format, with members of the board physically present in the commission chambers and applicants, staff, and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. In order to participate in today's meeting, members of the public may dial 1-888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 817-4834-7488 #, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 817-4834-7488. Any individual wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon if they're using the Zoom app, or dial *9 if they're participating by phone. Before I swear in the public, I'd like to read the city's notice regarding lobbyist registration. If you're appearing on behalf of a business, a corporation, or another person, you need to register as a lobbyist with the city clerk's office. If you haven't registered yet, you should register before you speak to the board. You don't have to register as a lobbyist if you're speaking only on behalf of yourself and not any other party, or if you're testifying as an expert witness, providing only scientific, technical, or other specialized information or testimony in this public meeting, or if you're appearing as a representative of a neighborhood association without any compensation or reimbursement for your appearance, to express support of or opposition to any item. Expert witnesses and representatives of neighborhood associations shall, prior to appearing, disclose in writing to the city clerk their name, address, and the principal on whose behalf they are communicating. If you're an architect, attorney, or employee representing an applicant or an objector, you must register as a lobbyist. These rules apply whether you're appearing in favor of or against an item, or encouraging or arguing against its passage, defeat, modification, or continuance. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to swear in any individuals who will be testifying today, including staff. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear under oath the testimony you'll give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nick. The first order of business this morning is the approval of the December 13th minutes. Do we have a motion? Motion made by Mr. Breslin, seconded by Mr. Pascal. All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimously. We do have a request for continuance this morning, Mr. Chair, and this is HPB 210499. This is 1445 Pennsylvania Avenue. The applicant has reached out to staff, and I believe they are requesting a continuance to the February 14th meeting. This is for a certificate of appropriateness for the partial demolition, renovation, and restoration of the existing building, including the construction of a one-story rooftop addition, an active roof deck, and a variance to exceed the hours of operation. So we do have the applicant's representative on the line. I see Adrian Noto. So, PJ, if we could pull up Adrian. Just for the record, staff has no objection to the request for continuance.
Good morning.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Debbie. Happy New Year. Good morning, Board. My name is Adrian Noto with Green Spoon Mortar with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue on behalf of the applicant. We did reach out to staff with regards to the request to continuance, and after conferring with our client and with the architect, the plans are actually taking longer to redesign than expected. So we actually are requesting a continuance to the April calendar if possible. That way we have enough time for the plans to be redesigned and to provide them to staff to review before that hearing.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. To clarify, Adrian, the application cannot be continued more than 120 days without it being presented to the board. The February meeting at this point would be the latest date the application could be continued to. You are, however, allowed to request a one-time deferral. A one-time deferral should be requested in writing to the planning department. At that point, we can create the deferral invoice, and we will need to renotice the application for the date the application is deferred to. So would you, if you would like to do that, that is allowable, and the board actually does not need to vote on that because that is permitted under the code.
That's right.
Okay, yes, we would like to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Staff has no objection to a one-time deferral. Again, anyone from the public interested in this application, the deferral is currently not set as a date, but as the applicant said, they're looking at the April meeting. This will be fully renoticed for the April meeting. So all properties within 375 feet will get a notice. It will be posted, the property, and we will do a Herald ad. So if you're interested in this, just keep an eye out for the notices for the new date. With that, we can move on. No, there's no action required by the board for the one-time deferral. Adrian, just follow up with an email to planning requesting that deferral, and we will go ahead and process that.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I think we had one request this morning to change one of the applications, the order of hearing. This was HPB file 220548. That is currently listed as the first application under modifications, and I believe there's a business conflict, and they would like to be heard as the second regular application instead of the third. I have no objection to that. If the board concurs, we can go ahead and modify that order of applications. Everyone agree? Okay. So the first regular application is HPB file 20.
It's 21-0476, 1426 Lenox Avenue. An application has been filed requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of an accessory building within the rear yard and variances from the required setbacks, lot coverage, and open space requirements.
Thank you, Jake. This subject property contains a home that was constructed in 1940 and designed by architect David T. Ellis in the Deco transitional style of architecture. Staff would note that the current property owner has already obtained some building permits for the renovation and restoration of the existing home, as well as other improvements to the site. The applicant is currently requesting approval for the construction of a 2-story accessory building. This building will contain guest quarters in the required rear yard. Staff is very supportive of this modest addition, which is within the scale, massing, and character of the surrounding single-family neighborhood. Staff believes that the new addition located at the rear of the site is also the most appropriate location and will not have any adverse impact on the existing contributing home. Staff would note that while the applicant is requesting some variances, the proposed overall unit size is well below the maximum permitted. The variances are to exceed by 2.52% the maximum permitted lot coverage of 30%. This is a bit of a tricky one to kind of wrap your head around because it is an existing 1-story home. 1-story homes are permitted a lot coverage of 50%. However, since their addition, which is very small compared to the size of the property, is 2 stories, that requires us to evaluate the property based on a 2-story lot coverage, which in this case is 30%. Therefore, they are asking a variance. Staff does believe that because this is in a historic district, they are not eligible for the incentives that are provided to non-historic homes outside of historic districts or individually designated historic homes. Therefore, we do believe that this is a unique situation. We do have very few single-family homes located in historic districts, and we are very supportive of that very minor lot coverage variance. They are also asking for a variance from the maximum permitted accessory building lot coverage. So both of those are regarding lot coverage. Again, this is within the required rear yard. They are permitted 25% 25% lot coverage in the required rear yard for the accessory building, and they're asking for 27%. Staff believes that the certificate of appropriateness criteria, which do require that addition to be located in a manner that it would not detract from the existing contributing home, justifies that variance request. Finally, they are asking for 2 setback variances. One is to reduce by 5 feet the required interior side setback of 10 feet in order to construct the accessory building at 5 feet. This is on the north property line. And the other is to reduce by 13 feet the minimum required rear yard setback. So it's the north side setback and the rear yard setback that they're asking for the variances from. The north side setback is proposing to continue the existing setback. So the contributing building has an existing setback of 5 feet. They're requesting that be maintained for the new addition. The rear setback is a rather unique condition because this property, which abuts an alley, across the alley is a commercial zoning district. So in this particular case, staff does believe this is highly unique and warrants the variance request. So with that, we are supportive. I believe the applicant is here today and has had a brief conversation with their adjacent neighbor to the north. And so I believe they're going to give you a short presentation to get any of your comments, but potentially be asking for a continuance. With that, if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer. If not, we can turn it over to the applicant.
Any questions from the board? Kirk?
I'm just curious, this hadn't come to this board that I can recall before, a variance on the lot coverage. How much of a variance is the board allowed to provide if the lot coverage maximum is 30%? I'm just was curious with how that part of the zoning code reads.
I don't believe there's a limit on the variance that can be approved.
Okay, thank you.
And I had a question also, Debbie. I'm just looking at the neighborhood map, and it looks like Properties, coupled to the north and coupled to the south, also have structures that are very close to the rear property line. So there's a context for this, right?
Correct.
Okay, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Wesley Castellanos. I'm registered architect with Castellanos Design Studio, 7300 Biscayne Boulevard in Miami. I come before you because I wanted to present this project of this guest house in the historic district. So to give you a quick summary of the project, a gentleman bought the property about 2 years ago and completely restored the existing structure on the property. The beauty behind this property is that it had good bones. It just needed some cosmetic upgrade and pretty much some TLC. That being said, he does plan on living there. He's a very eminent doctor. He lives in Miami, and he wants to just stay there for the rest of his life. That being, in addition, he wants to bring his family here. His mom, he wants to have. The guest house is actually in-laws' quarters for his mother and his fathers when they come here. He's from Louisiana, so that he wants to create this guest house. So as we started developing the guest house, we found the only appropriate location would be in the rear. Having such a small rear yard because of the main house being pushed back so far, about 50 feet, it limited us. That's why we're asking for these variances. I had a meeting, just a short meeting, with the neighbor right next to us, who's on the north, Miss Sarah Wright, and I know she's in opposition of the variances, but I want to just present to you the project so we can see if I can get any commentary about the design. But I understand that the variances have a constriction right now with the neighbor, so I'm going to work it out with the neighbor with the variance request of the north, and then the rear setback, and then whatever lot coverage. But if I may, I wanted to present the project to you. Is basically a box. What I wanted to do is this box is that I had to raise it to the flood elevation of 9 feet. Downstairs would be a lobby. I'm sorry, it would be a lobby. Would be a living room, and the second floor would be the bedroom. So the way I did it is I wanted to create these architectural elements to the guest house, put a cornice, these awnings, and this balcony. And then it would overlook potentially a pool in the future. Now, come today, we realized that the rear setback, which is the one on the alley, is about 2 feet. We're asking for that variance because of the other properties in the area. It is it's an unsightly area because it is a commercial space. So the main one is the north. The north one is a 10-foot variance. It's a 5-foot variance request because we're trying to align it with the main home, and that's where we are today. So I'm asking for a continuance, but if I can get any commentary on any of the architecture that you see, I will be coordinating with Ms. Wright and her attorney via email to make sure we have everything. But my goal is to make sure that protect her well-being, best interest of the owner, and on top of that, preserve the historic character of the area. And I thank you very much for your time, and if you can give any commentary.
Thank you, Mr. Castellanos. If the board has any questions, why don't we get them all out to him, and then we'll ask you to respond to them all at once.
Okay.
Thanks.
I am curious in terms of your neighbor, what the objection is, since it's the same 5-foot line. What is actually opposite where you're planning to build this building that would be so objectionable to her? And we'd like to know that, I think.
Okay.
Now, you answer that later.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions from the board? No? Okay. If you'd like to respond to that, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I haven't really understood. Well, we haven't really talked. Would you mind, madam? Okay. I mean, she's going to have a really good reason.
Maybe wait
You
till
know
the
what,
public.
ma'am? We're going to open up for public comment, and
Oh, there
that
you
will
go.
be the right time, and we'll
Correct.
certainly have you come up and share your thoughts.
That's the way to do it.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I understand that the applicant is requesting a continuance.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't they see if they can work out their issues, and then at the continued hearing, we review the plan as it will be revised. And so we just address the request for a continuance now.
Debbie?
I think it would be beneficial. This is a very modest project. If the board has any design comments with regard to the architecture and the placement of the addition, that way when he comes back, not only the neighbors' comments will be addressed, but any additional comments the board members have would also be addressed.
But addressing the neighbors' comments, the design is likely to be different. So,
If I may, we worked the design with the owner very well. That's why we were able to push it to that point where we're asking for the variance. If we were to come back with after meeting with the owner and seeing what we can, we would most likely just shift the structure to be in compliance. But again, if I may, this is the request to have this suitable program sit on the site. So for the program to fit properly in the site, that's the reason for the variance request. So I would shift it for her, sorry, if I may, for the neighbor, and to make it work for her, but at the same time, the owner, for it to work programmatically, the site plan is really how we're trying to present it today.
Okay, I think Nancy had a question too.
Wait a minute. Good. It's a little confusing the way you're saying it.
Yeah.
As I listened, I couldn't understand why you want to bring it forward today with certain comments, and we haven't explored those.
Okay.
But why can't the whole thing go together? I don't understand what
agree.
happens to the woman. I assume that's her.
Okay, so
We're about to open public comment, and we'll hear from the neighbor, and then we'll have a chance to make our own comments after that.
We've never seen anything like this,
Yeah, 'cause-
I don't think.
yes.
just really briefly, that it seems to me that what the applicant is looking to do is just take our pulse, gauge our temperature, how do we feel about the project, not asking us to vote on it today. They want to continue it. And I don't think that's the proper use of the board. People don't come before us just to ask us, what do you think about this? And we'll come ask you for an approval at a future date. I don't think that's the way.
If I could just clarify, the applicant did submit a fully realized application, a fully complete application was submitted. It's only today that they learned of the neighbor's objection. And I do think, for the sake of expediency at the next hearing, that because this is a full application, it's appropriate for the board to give any other comments that you may have regarding the certificate of appropriateness.
So to that end, if the applicant wants to walk us through the proposal any further, I mean, we have it in front of us,
I think
that would
then
be the
let's
natural thing to
proceed.
do.
I think we should just proceed with the full application, and whatever opposition
Yeah,
comes up,
we'll
do
hear
it.
the opposition, we'll take it from
Perfect.
there.
Perfect. Okay, so surely. So basically, that was my summary of the project. The application is basically to do the guest house for the owner and his mom in the backyard. The reason why it was positioned in this location is because of the northern side, and the pool most likely would go on the south, and it would get the most southern exposure. So, and then again, but with the historic preservation, my request today is that the existing home was fully preserved. We understand that this is a whole contextual element. So the guest house that we designed in the rear has architectural features in it where I propose some cornice, some marble cornice, some coral elements. Unfortunately, since we do have to meet the floodplain of raising the structure and creating the two-story structure, that's where the story gets a little taller. So going up, the main home is about 4.5 feet. I have to go up another 4.5 feet to meet the floodplain, and then I do 2 stories on top of that. We're not proposing anything on the roof. There's not going to be any generator or anything on the roof, so it's going to have architectural features on the guest house. So as limited of a space that I can do, and that's why I was just encroaching a little bit with the lot coverage. I'm only asking for 3% more, a little bigger, because that's only really the amount of space I can get. And my limitations only allow me to do this single story, and then put another story to make it a feasible guest house. And then that's how we are today. Yes, madam.
Got it. Does that conclude
Okay, let me
your
conclude
presentation?
that will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Ask it again. if the party who's objecting was not objecting, would you be able to complete what you're doing today?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't
Mr. Chairman,
understand.
before we open to the public, do any board members have any ex parte communications to disclose on this application?
Okay.
Just
Thank you.
Just that I
you can-
reviewed-
You can take a seat. We're going to go ahead and open the public comment, right?
I'm just going to make a disclosure that
Okay.
I reviewed the MDPL positions for each of the applications, including this one, that are in right, and they were emailed to the board members as well.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Debbie, do you want to call the public?
Yes, any members of the public on Zoom or in chambers, please either raise your hand or come forward.
Okay.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sarah, and I live at 1430 Lenox, and my property's directly north of 1426 Lenox. And I've lived in Miami Beach since '97, always living in the Flamingo Park area. My family bought 1430 Lenox 2.5 years ago. I love my house. I love my neighborhood. 1426 Lenox has been under construction for almost 2 years now, and I was happy to see that the owners were restoring it and maintaining the original architecture. However, last month I was surprised when I received in the mail the notice about today's hearing to request a series of variances to build a 2-story building in the backyard. Of most concern to me is the variance request to build 5 feet from my property instead of the required 10. I looked at the plans online. I saw that the proposed building's almost 30 feet in height, and it would run over 21 feet in length along the side of my backyard. This would impact me and my family's enjoyment of the property. Having a building tower over my backyard, just 5 feet from my property line, would block our access to air, to light, the view from our house, and is totally out of line with the other properties in the neighborhood. I called Ms. Tackett last month to get more information and share my concerns. She suggested I attend today's hearing, and since I'm not familiar with this process, I retained Mr. Gibbs to assist me. Owners, including my neighbor, should be totally entitled to the freedom to enjoy their property, and it's not my place to interfere with that. However, the code was designed for a reason, and it specifically states that this building must be 10 feet from my property line and 15 feet from the back alley. I haven't met my neighbor yet since he hasn't lived there due to construction. I don't want to start off on the wrong foot with him, and it's not my style to really challenge or confront. So it's a little difficult for me to be here today, but I do want to protect my rights and enjoy my property, and I'd like to live here for decades to come. I just met with the architect right now, and I'd love to continue talking to him to see if there's a way to work this out so that my neighbor can enjoy his property, have his parents come and visit, and then I can enjoy my backyard as well. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for your comments and for being here. This is the right way to do it. Are there any other public comments?
Okay.
I just wanted to go on the record, that's all, to say that my client is interested in settling this, and so is the applicant, and we would support a continuance so we can actually do that. And you don't have to listen to me give a very long-winded explanation from the law's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Matthew Goltanoff from the Miami Design Preservation League. We are supportive of this project to add a modest 2-story accessory structure. We believe it does, we are pleased to see the renovation and restoration of the contributing structure, the single-family home on the site, especially given the plight of single-family homes throughout Miami Beach. Learning today, though, of the concerns of the neighbor, we are supportive also of a continuance of this so that they can resolve their differences. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on Zoom?
I do not see anyone on Zoom.
Okay,
Close
so
the
we'll
public hearing.
invite the applicant to come back if you'd like to provide a response or a rebuttal.
Okay. I will meet with Ms. Wright We would try to coordinate it, but for me to immediately stipulate my redesign of the project, if we were to pursue that, it would probably be shifting the structure away from the north to request the variance. It will probably be, if we move it 10 feet, it would be dead center in the property. So, if I may, I would like to ask a continuance, but if there's any feedback, because as an architect and with your guidance, the historic structure is being well preserved. The guest house is really only limited to that location. Either I turn it into a stiletto, thinner, taller, because if not, he will not have a backyard. So that is really the limitations that I have. And if it's in response, it feels like 30 feet because it is a tall structure meeting the floodplain, but it's the 20-foot tall structure. But that's my response. If I can, I would really appreciate any of your feedback, and I would like to have these variances approved if I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we'll ask the board for any comments. Let me start at that end. Okay.
I would agree to a continuance as well, but to provide some feedback to the applicant, I suggest when you do return that beforehand review the city code on variance applications and make sure that you're able to demonstrate to the board in order to get my vote, and demonstrate that the 8 criteria in section 118-353D, it says what findings are required by the board to grant a variance. If you can demonstrate and have the evidence or the testimony to show that we can make these findings, then I can support a variance, because even if the neighbor says I'm okay with the variance she was right, her statement that the city code is made as it is. That's the law. The very beginning of the hearing, not your hearing for the HPB today, the prior applicant was asking for continuance of a certain date, and the answer was, well, no, the code doesn't allow those certain numbers of days. So it's up, if the code doesn't fit where the code says how much the setback needs to be, it's up to the city commission to change it. We're allowed to grant variances when there are conditions that you're not able to make a reasonable use of your property, essentially, without the variance. So it's not just that, and I think that a lot of times people come before the boards and they explain, well, we need the variance because we have limitations, and our design is a great design, and our neighbors love the design, and it would be great for the neighborhood. And it is a beautiful design, but we are a board that it's sort of like a judicial board. It's called quasi-judicial. We're required to enforce the law and not just express our opinions and vote according to our gut. So when you come back, if you could demonstrate that the criteria, the legal criteria, are satisfied for granting a variance, you'll have my vote too.
Thank you.
Good morning. So I would argue, obviously, variances are called variances for a reason, and it's within your right to apply for them. And as Stuart mentions, it's also a responsibility to make a compelling argument for them. There are two things architecturally about the project, about your thing, that maybe you'll consider when you're talking with the neighbor. One is, I noticed on the east side of your addition you have area for vines, and you didn't have anything on the north side. Maybe the north side could be greener, as something that you could consider. And also another thing that you might consider, you may not, but just shifting the orientation, so the shorter side, so you don't reduce the footprint, but you change the orientation, so the north side does not have the long side of the those might be just things that I can think of to consider moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and your presentation. And I know preserving these single-family homes is an extreme, honestly, a burden to a lot of property owners. So thank you to the property owner as well. I'm very supportive of this project. However, I do understand the neighbors' concerns, and perhaps recommendation would be I understand the resiliency criteria, and again, thank you to the property owner for undertaking this endeavor and this cost, but perhaps a win-win would be as you're conversing with your neighbor, it sounds like her main concern is light and air. Perhaps you could step back on the second level where it more so affects her property so that you have more of a stepped building rather than just one solid, what is essentially a three-level structure. The other thing I noticed is perhaps the interior stairs to the second level, perhaps those could be exterior in a way so that it's not such a massive, structure on the rear alley. Those are just some considerations, food for thought as you discuss with the property owner, but very supportive overall of the project and hope to see it next month.
Thank you.
I agree. I believe that you're going to come back with a good, it's not this or that. You're coming back with a kind of a two-sided thing and trying to put it together, which is very difficult sometimes. But I wish you well to do it. I think the idea, the location, and everything that surrounds this place is important enough to get out and not have to figure out who's going to win the game. I don't get that. Good luck.
Thank you.
So I was very supportive of the project in reading this. At the same time, that was one of my questions, was wondering what the impact would be on the affected parties with regard to the setbacks. I'm very appreciative of Ms. Sarah. I don't believe you said your last name, but I know that there's a lot of sacrifice for homeowners to come and be here. And I think, generally speaking, folks in, whether it's a historic district or not, rely on setbacks to protect their interests and don't really expect that they necessarily need to come to advocate for themselves. It's sort of, I think, is expected as a given, but I think a lot of neighbors who become aware and engaged find out that it isn't necessarily so. So I empathize with the homeowner to the north. At the same time, I'm very appreciative of the renovation of the existing structure. I think the design of the new structure is really nicely done. I think sort of continues to ideally set a standard for how this historic district and single-family properties can be retained, and at the same time to incentivize investment. The other side of that coin is that it appears that you're sort of hugging the north of the property to maintain room for a pool, I think, is the idea. And I struggle with the idea of that being possibly the neighbor's sacrifice, because you could have a pool or a guest house, and ideally, if there's a middle ground, maybe there's an opportunity to have a smaller pool and a guest house, and maybe not affect the property to the north, because I do understand. It appears to be that the typical design of the historic contributing structures, I'm assuming the structure to the north is contributing as well, even though I don't know that, but they appear to be one story with a fair amount of open lot space, and I think when you get to the intensity of increasing that to 2 stories plus floodplain, I can understand why that would be daunting. So I really appreciate your coming. I appreciate your taking the time to empathize with one another and hopefully come up with a solution where, I don't know if I should call it a compromise, but hopefully the project can be successful, and at the same time, the neighbor can maintain the enjoyment and well-being of her property. So I think it's a great project, and I appreciate your bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to conclude the board comments, you've heard a number of interesting recommendations that might be helpful. One more to add to that list might be to consider working with an overhang rather than a parapet, because the parapet increases the kind of visual impact of it, makes it look a little taller. You probably get a roof on there, without that additional masonry, and it might lessen the visual impact for the neighbor. But there have been, I think, a number of good suggestions, and we're happy to see that you guys are talking, and we trust that you can work it out. We look forward to seeing you back here soon.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll need a motion. The request is for a continuance, Wesley, to the February 14th meeting.
I'll move it to continue this to February 14th.
Okay. Do we have a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that passes. We'll see you in February.
The next file is HPB 22-0548, 3425 Collins Avenue. An application has been filed requesting modifications to a previously issued certificate of appropriateness. Specifically, the applicant is requesting approval for the new lobby design of the Versailles Hotel building.
Thank you, Jake. As you can see in the background section of your staff report, this particular property has an extremely lengthy history, dating back to 2011. So over 10 years, this board has been reviewing projects for this particular site. This is an exceptional contributing building in the Collins Waterfront Historic District. It has been vacant for quite some time. The current property owner, because this did change ownership over the years, has done substantial amount of structural work. They do have a building permit for the previously approved project. So, we're happy to report that there has been some structural work completed for this particular building as it stands today. It looks rather precarious when you drive or walk on Collins Avenue. So we are extremely happy that the project that was approved by the board in 2020 for the Aman Hotel and Residences appears to be moving forward at this point. That is why the current applicant is back before you. Part of between 2020 and 2021, there were various approvals for this particular project. And in one of those orders, there is a condition that requires the reconfigured lobby, which was the geometry of the lobby had been previously approved by the board, but the final finishes and design of the lobby was required to come back to you. This is the last physical part of the project that requires the review of this board. So we are enthusiastic and very cautiously optimistic that this project will be moving forward. We have been working with the applicant and their design team on the finishes and fixtures and materials proposed for the lobby overall. We are very supportive of the proposed design, which does retain the original columns. That is pretty much the only original fabric that remains. However, we do believe that the new proposed finishes are consistent with the character of the Art Deco lobby design that is frequently found in these hotels. Our only comment was with regard to the exterior porch portion in that terrazzo. Since that exterior front porch is proposed to be retained and restored in accordance with historic documentation, staff did request that design be further developed to be more indicative of what was likely the original terrazzo pattern. Since the writing of the staff report, we have continued to work with the applicant, who was able to find some additional historic documentation of that front porch area. While not definitive, I believe today they are going to be presenting a revised design, which in staff's opinion does satisfy our concerns. And if the board agrees, we would like that, what they present today, and I believe they're going to pass out, referenced in the final order. With that, I will turn it over to the applicant unless the board has any questions.
Debbie, while I'm keenly interested in seeing this presentation, I do have to recuse myself. So I'll be temporarily handing the gavel here to my friend Kirk.
Okay,
and I'll
very
step
good.
outside.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board, Neeson Kasdan and Marissa Amual representing the applicant. I would first ask before we start two things. Number one, we have a presentation. If you would please put it on the screen. Number two, Mr. City Attorney, I think we need to swear in their witnesses who have come since, I think, your original oath.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So anyone who's not been sworn in, please raise your right hands. Do you swear under oath that the testimony you'll give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. With me today on the team includes Richard Heisenbottle, who will be presenting shortly, Hernando Marin from Revuelta Architects. Also on by Zoom, and thank you for accommodating this change in schedule, is a principal designer from Deniston, Diana Oliva, who is in Malaysia, which is quite a time difference. And I just want to make a few brief comments before we start. This is, as Debbie mentioned, this is the last of a series of approvals for this truly magnificent project. As Debbie also mentioned, through the extensive research that was done, the design team had identified really the only remaining visible historical elements of the lobby, and are doing more than just restoring it, but featuring it, as you will see in this presentation. A couple of technical matters I'd like to cover as well. Number one, this is the part of a consolidated order. Remember, there were separate orders for the residential tower, the Versailles itself, the basement, and so we have some changes to the order, which I'd like to submit to you as Exhibit B, and just to clarify all the elements of the order. We've reviewed them with staff, and they're fine with them, except the one edit where we say in Section 1C, where we deleted a reference to meeting the criteria of Section 13350A. We're keeping that in. That's the resiliency criteria. So this will be distributed to you now. More importantly, as Debbie also mentioned, our Exhibit A shows the response based on the historical research that the desire to create an inlay pattern in the front terrace of the hotel. That's being distributed to you now and will be presented by Richard and the team. But with that, I'll turn it over to Richard for his presentation.
Neeson, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who's here at the board level. Some of you are new members. Some of you may not have seen the Aman presentation before. Some of you have seen it 36 times. John was off the board, on the board, off the board, on the board. You know, Kirk is eternal, but really, I'm kidding around because today, Nancy, today is a day to celebrate the fact that we've gotten to the end of a very important process that allows us to move forward and restore one of Miami Beach's signature properties that when we started this 2 years ago, none of us were sure we could get to the end. None of us were sure that we could create a project as special as the Aman Hotel is going to be here. And so it is with great pride that I speak to you today, and I present for the Deniston team. Deniston is the design architects and interior designers for Aman. Deniston has set the brand design, the brand concept for for what is today a 31 property chain. Denniston did the last 8 of their hotels. They're a spectacular firm that has kind of established this pleasing, minimalist silhouette and with breathtaking landscapes and intimate, intuitive, and discreet and rigorously detailed buildings. So without further ado, let's go ahead and walk through the presentation today, and we'll show you what is under review. The area that you see in red on the overall site plan here is the limit of our discussions today. All of the rest of these spaces, all the rest of that site plan are things that have come before the board before, and so this is, as Deborah said, the final completion of the product. So this is the porch out in the front and the lobby behind it. Let's go to the next slide. This is, Deborah, actually a really important photograph, because when you expressed the comment and concern about what was the porch, what did the original porch look like, we only had this one photograph of that porch to go forward with as evidence for, and as we looked a little closer at it and zoomed into it, go to the next slide, please. We found that the evidence of the floor pattern on the porch was actually clear, and that we could, and we have since revised the pattern, you're going to see it in a minute, to represent the pattern of the porch floor from the original design. It was again changed in 1955, so I think you can see that in there now. We just needed to zoom in a little bit closer to that photograph to find what we needed. Go ahead to the next slide. This is the condition of the porch and the entrance porch today. As you can see, it's in a rather deplorable condition. But on the upper right-hand corner, you can see what was the terrazzo floor that was simply added in 1955. And we're going to dispense with that and go forward with what you'll see in a few minutes that mimics the original. Go ahead again, forward. As was also stated, there is very little left of the interior of the building, of the lobby, but the most important elements are right there. And they're staring us in the face, and we're happy to have them. It is what is left of these 4 columns. And those 4 columns provided the additional evidence that was necessary for Denniston to conceive of the new lobby that takes into account the history of the old lobby, and at the same time creates this minimalist, slightly Asian, slightly Art Deco design that you're going to see in a minute, or the design that you actually see in the rendering in front of me. Go ahead to the next one, please. So if you look at this overall floor plan, we got one of those up on the easel over here on the right. You can see, Deborah, that we've adjusted the porch per our interpretation of the additional evidence in the photograph that we talked about earlier, and that this represents the lobby area. You see the 4 round columns in there. Those are the 4 round columns that we are talking about, and will be replicating exactly the way in their proportion that they were before. Let's continue again to the next slide. There is probably the best rendering, the best example of how those columns will meet with a smooth plaster ceiling and be highlighted with lighting from below. You notice the use of cove lighting here as well to accent them. They are the superstars of the new lobby. Next slide. Now, this is the materials board. You're welcome to come down and actually touch some of these materials. We have them in front of you. Just to give you an idea, they constitute a whole host of things here, from metal to terrazzo, to marble, to cane, to timber, and some very, very special fabrics along the way. And on the right-hand side, of course, you see some of the historic photos of the building. But unfortunately, none of those photos truly show us the interior. But we believe that this palette that you have in front of you does an absolutely great job of enhancing the lobby and doing great justice to it historically. Next slide, please. And so you can begin to see in this slide where we have on the right-hand side used the color blue, which was the same color blue that we have that showed up in the field in the 4 columns that remain out there. We're going to talk about black and white later on in the rear as you go forward into the elevator lobby. You're going to see some of the trim, some of the metal trims on the right-hand side is what I'm looking at right now, and some of the screens, and some of the use of stone also, all going down the right-hand side, and of course on the left as well, some of the color palette of white, some of the timber ceiling, and some of the screens. Go forward, please. Next. So, but first to kind of finish up, if you would, on the design of the porch. The porch has 3 different layers of material. It will have a terrazzo material. I think you can see in front of you probably better than we can on screen. And it will have 2 layers of marble banding. The color of the marble is literally right there on the screen, and you can find it also in the sample board here. So that's how we have interpreted the original porch design, and with new terrazzo and new accents, if you would. You'll see some more of those accents as we go into the lobby. Next slide, please. And this explains the porch just a little bit better. As I was saying, the main body of the space is terrazzo, and we have two different banding colors and the accent. I think that this board does it justice and really clarifies it. Next, please. And so we're going to move now to the lobby floor finishes, and let's go from here and go right to the next slide. The lobby floor finish is a very similar situation. If you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you see a series of other Art Deco and period hotels that utilize, including the Roy France, that utilize this same sort of floor pattern that we're proposing in detail on the right-hand side. So that accent, that accent square, is a characteristic of the period, and yes, that is a bonsai tree set in the middle of the room between all of the between the 4 columns. Next, please.
How much more additional time do you need?
Oh, I would suggest 2 minutes, Max.
2 minutes?
And again, we've talked a little bit about the historic decoration of the columns. In this case, the columns are actually made out of marble. They're not faux marble. They actually will be marble. It's a very off-white marble, but it is in fact real marble. Go to the next one. And you can see how, with the detail in the middle, how we are exactly replicating the proportions of the original and allowing it to finish against the plaster ceiling in the same way that it always did. Next slide, please. And just to show you a few more details here, because Denniston is is known for their details, you can see some of the cove lighting here that accents this entire room. It is built into this, both at the columns and at the perimeter walls and at the timber ceiling. Next. And while furniture is not really a part of your review, I want you to know that these folks took it so seriously that they went down to the details of the furniture. And what we're looking at here is a historical photographic display. And they literally built an accessory. Instead of just putting photos on the wall, John, go to the next one, please. As you might have seen off on the left here with some of the historic photos of the building, they built a case. They built literally a custom bookshelf, like the one you see on the lower right, to house this historical display, which will be right there in the lobby, depicting the history of the building for everyone to see for years to come. Next. And this is how that decorative display will be detailed and handled. I think something just very, very carefully. By the way, that's leather and the brush bronze. Next. And we also want you to know that a lot of detail has gone into these various screens that you're seeing here. Also, go to the next one. They're all highlighted right there, but. And they all get their motifs from the Art Deco period, from the architecture of the Art Deco period. And some of them are laser cut in this particular case. Go to the next one. But it all comes from the history of the place, the history of Miami Beach, the history of our Art Deco past. So I think with that, go to the next one, please. We have the similar situation in the detailing of the main reception desk. Go ahead, next. And some of the screens. We can go next. And just again, just details of those screens, just to give you an idea of the attention to detail that we use. So with that, we'll wrap this up. Go to the next one, and the next one we'll just go to. Yeah, picking up on literally all of the sort of Art Deco detail. Forward, please. Next. We're not going to get into the furniture, but suffice it to say you're looking at our Art Deco period furniture on the left, and while we have not chosen our pure Art Deco furniture on the right-hand side for the room, you find that that what has been chosen is very minimalistic and sympathetic to the furniture of the period. Go ahead. Next. And this just really represents the black and white detailing, a characteristic of Art Deco that will be in the elevator lobby behind us. Go ahead next, please. And you've seen the use of pure black and white all over town over the years. This is the upper right-hand corner, kind of depicts that better. And that pretty much wraps it up. Let's go to the final slide, please. That's it. Let's leave that there and open this up for any questions you might have, I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes our presentation. I do thank you for bearing with us. I know we showed a lot more than really is for this board's consideration, the furniture and the screening and such, but I think it was important for you to understand the thought that has gone into this. We remain available for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any board disclosures first off? Anybody? Okay. Do we want to go through and do any board members have questions? No questions. Okay. Should we open it up to public comment?
I can ask a question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there are any sort of recognizable designs from the Versailles Palace in France that might be part of this or incorporate, because I mean, it shares the name. I was wondering if maybe the original...
Does not share the architecture.
Certainly not. I mean, that's over the top.
And for that reason alone.
But when we're talking about the design of the pattern for the terrazzo floor, I'm wondering if there are some things from the actual Versailles Palace that may be where somebody, well, hey, I've seen that there.
Not to
like a connection.
Not to be the know-it-all, but I think it would be hugely inappropriate, Stuart, because they are so architecturally different. To incorporate anything from the Versailles Palace would be a misrepresentation of what we're supposed to do under the Secretary's standards.
I think the only thing I've ever seen on Miami Beach that incorporated a look of the Versailles Palace were the original gardens at the Fontainebleau Hotel. There's more Versailles in the Fontainebleau, and was.
Well, I was just looking up images online, and like for the Casa Casuarina, they've got things that look like from the French king, Louis, whichever number he was. But there were floors with the black and white patterns that encompass a large area, outdoor area of the Versailles. Just something that I saw, and I thought maybe seeking to be helpful.
We don't want to falsely replicate history.
That wasn't a part of this site ever, anyway.
Yes. That's just from a technical perspective.
Okay, should we open it up for public comment?
Yes, thank you, Rich and Neeson. Yes, any members of the public on Zoom, please raise your hand. Any members of the public in chambers, please step forward.
Hi, good morning again. Matthew Goltanoff with the Miami Design Preservation League. We're thrilled at the renovation of the historic Versailles building that it will be moving forward. We agree with Mr. Kasdan that this is a magnificent project. We support the staff recommendations for the design of the lobby, including the pattern of the terrazzo floor in the front entryway. It does appear that has been resolved, so we are supportive of this application moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Mitch Novick on Zoom. Good morning, Mitch.
Good morning, Mitch. Do you swear that the testimony you'll give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Happy New Year to everyone. I'm in full support of this project. Just have a question. The restoration of the Versailles involves changing the floor plates. That, I imagine, would be done before the new construction begins. A concern I often have is the new building gets completed and then the oops factor kicks in and they need to take down the original structure. Are we, meaning the public, protected from such a situation? And perhaps the development team could elaborate. I'm looking forward to seeing this real intensive restoration with severe modifications to take place. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. See no other members of the public, Mr. Chair, you can close the public hearing and have the applicant rebuttal.
No, Mr. Chair, no need for rebuttal. I do want to, if I may, just note for Mitch that, of course, the restoration of the hotel has to be completed prior to the certificate of occupancy for the new residential tower. And just for Mitch's edification, the Jack Stewart mural is now at the bakehouse where our client is paying for its full restoration, and that is being worked on as we speak. I would also sort of publicly make this plea. The city needs to decide where it's going to go and make that decision quickly. But we may be coming back to you on that as well.
Thank you, Neeson.
The only other thing I would, just to reiterate, we did submit in our Exhibit B the proposed modifications to the order, including the incorporation of the design you just saw for the front patio.
Thank you. To move to board comments, Ray?
This is an excellent project. My only concern about it, honestly, is the bonsai tree in the middle. I think it detracts from the 4 columns, and it takes away from the open space of the lobby, and I think it should not be part of what's presented to us. You may decide in the future to want to put it in or take it out. I would like to see it not part of this presentation. Thank you.
Nancy, do you want to go next?
This is going on for so long, I don't know what to say. I'm glad that you carved it down to the last moment if we had to sit through everything. How long has this been going on?
Since I've been involved, at least since 2014 or 15, when it originally was going to be part of the Faena, and there was the Norman Foster designed tower and the restoration of the Versailles, and then and the elimination of the Florida room, or I forgot what the name of the room was now, that had been demolished, and then of course Gulfstream, right, and then of course it came back and has been modified with the new residential building designed by Kengo Kuma, as well as this, of course, the centerpiece, the restoration and renovation and expansion of the historic tower, the historic Versailles, including the rebuilding of the Gulfstream room, which was the original historic dining room there, and now this is the very last piece, which is the public interior, the lobby, which is being presented to you. And then you will see, if you go to the site, there already begun work necessary to prepare for the encasing and restoration of the Versailles Hotel itself. So it's moving forward.
Well, it is a pleasure to see it to this, because I don't even know about the first part before I became member of this board, and now this is my last day on this board, and it's here. So I applaud you and everybody else who had the energy to put this in place.
Thank you. And there was also the parallel process of creating amendments to the Faena overlay, which facilitated this project. So it's been a lot of years in the making, and a lot of people have been involved in this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Laura, do you want to go next?
I mean, thank you to ownership, the whole team. It's beautiful, fantastic. I agree with staff recommendations. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I remember back to 2014, I think, 2015, when this first came in, and it's come along. It's come a tremendously long way, and I'm always optimistic that this is going to be a great project. It's just now seeing these final plans in the lobby, I think, really show that the process has been worth it, and I'm really looking forward to this building being something that we can all be proud of walking by and walking into and whatever. So thank you very much to everybody involved. I fully approve this project as presented and by you guys and staff.
Thanks, John. Stuart?
I agree with the sentiments and comments about how much thought went into it and how attractive it is and appropriate it looks. The Art Deco elements being restored, original with the columns. But I have maybe a question too, just sort of pick up on what Ray mentioned about the bonsai in the middle. If it would anyway limit the applicant, that if this is an element of their plan, that if they would want to then remove it in the future, would they have to come back to the HPB to remove something like that? Also, their plan had many elements, such as the leather bookcase. Let's say it gets scratched up. Would they have to come back to us to change that? Because I would rather approve it without certain things that they can then at their own discretion decide if they want a bonsai and not have them to have to come back to have a change to approved plans.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. That's a great question. So my understanding is that the bonsai tree and some of the other vegetation in the lobby are movable planters. Some of the other, movable furnishings are shown in the plans really as a reference to this board. This board does not need to approve movable furnishings, tables, chairs, potted plants, artwork, and that type of thing. Your approval today is really the hard finishes, the architectural interventions that are happening in the lobby. Staff will review furniture plans, window treatment, light fixtures, those types of things with through the permitting process, and if it changes in the future, if they want to, swap out an area rug or some of the furnishings, that is almost always done through, a very simple administrative process. They don't need building permits for those things. So you're really approving kind of the hard finishes, the ceiling details, the flooring, some of the built-in lighting cove features. But in terms of the finishes, that is something that, staff, will evolve over time and staff will be reviewing.
Mr. Reed, if I may, and I apologize if it created any confusion in, I think, the client's desire to show you how much thought they've given. They went well beyond what the jurisdiction of this board is, which does not include furniture, plants, screening, stuff of that. It is, as Debbie said, it's only limited to the structural, architectural elements, the surfaces and finishes that are permanently attached. So what was shown to you in those images was their further development of the thought, and is very illustrative, but is not really being voted on.
Well, right, but the prior board asked that they had to come back with a further developed lobby plan, and so but as far as like you were talking about landscaping, projects come before us all the time with very detailed landscaping plans. Let's say they decide these particular plants are attracting certain pests. Do they have to come back to the department and say we're going to make changes to our approved landscaping plan?
No, any sort of potted plant, movable potted plant would not be part of a landscape plan. It's really just a decoration. The landscape plan for the site, if they were going to make any significant changes, yes, they would come back through the permitting system. Very rarely would they be required to come to this board for any site landscaping changes. But a movable, potted plant, people put them in for Christmas, there'll probably be something different, or decorations, for different holidays or what have you. So that would not require any type of review, that type of fixture. It's really just a movable decoration, for lack of a better term.
So lastly, Ray, go ahead.
My question about the bonsai, is that a planter or is that removable?
Movable. Okay. It's a movable.
Okay. Because I think ultimately you're not going to like that. So as long as it can be moved, thank you.
And it remains to be seen what the actual, as I said, I mean, they went to beyond what was necessary or really within the domain.
Yeah, I was just concerned that it was a permanent, Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There will probably be tweaks on some of the furniture and furnishings and planters and stuff, I imagine.
So I'm grateful to have this final piece in front of us on my final day here. I can recall, I think this must have been your first go-round, John, when this started, and I remember some of the outgoing board members when I was coming in were super concerned about the Versailles. I know we've had I think I've said some contentious things up here about the Versailles. There was a lot of uncomfortable feeling along the way, and I'm so excited that we've come to this point. There's some great architects and teams that bring projects forward, but this is a great team, and I do lament that There's so little historical fabric and documentation. It's still unbelievable to me that we have so little to go by, and so little remains. And at the same time, I really like the way that you've featured what little is there. And again, I think you did a beautiful job, and with the features that you've added and recreated based on inspirations, which usually I rather refer to actual documentation, but I think you couldn't ask for a better team. I think you guys did a really great job, and I'm really excited and actually still very eager to see this project finished. Very, very, very eager. And I only had one other question because, again, there's so little there, and I think you've highlighted it really nicely. But the blue in the columns, I just wanted to ask if, 10 years down the road, somebody wants to repaint the structure and has no knowledge or regard for that component. Is that part of the order? I mean, does that become something that's actually protected, that blue highlight?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to answer
Yeah,
that?
please. Thank you.
So, I mean, we had some questions about that light blue painted surface as well. I don't think we've determined that that's original. Mr. Heisenbottle could probably expand on that, but I don't know if we can even determine if that was at all part of the original interior. That is the color that we see today, once things are scraped away. But it would have been unusual to see that type of feature. So, we didn't put it in the order because I don't think there's anything conclusive in terms of evidence leading us to believe that was original. I think it's appropriate, and I think it's great that something that's existing is being kind of preserved as part of the history of the site. But staff did not feel strongly either way about that proposed blue paint color.
Do you want to respond to that?
Just real quickly, I think Deborah hit the nail on the head. This is not something that we can be definitively sure about whether it was the first iteration or the third or fourth iteration down the road of historic paint. So it's been left out of the order in this case. But I think as part of the overall presentation and the overall charm that it adds and detail that it adds to the interior, I'm pleased to see it right now. That color is growing on me, but down the road, subsequent years, other groups will perhaps go ahead and change it. But for today, this is where we are.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody want to make a motion?
I'll be glad to.
Okay, Ms. Liebman, is that also to incorporate the recommended corrections that the applicant has distributed, with the exception of retaining section 13350A?
Yes.
Okay, so that is a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Let me call the roll. Ms. Weinstein-Berman?
Yes.
Mr. Breslin? Yes. Mr. Stewart? Yes. Mr. Reed? Mr. Pascal?
Yes.
Okay, that passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
This is probably the last time you'll be seeing me on this property.
On this project.
This is done. We're done now. So anyway.
No, you just got to
Thank
build
you all
it.
for your help.
The next file is HPB 22-0521 803 2nd Street. An application has been filed requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the total demolition of an existing building and the construction of a new single-family home, including variances from the minimum required setbacks. Required setbacks, lot width, and lot area.
Okay, thank you, Jake. This particular application was reviewed by the board at the December 13th meeting. Since that time, the board did continue the application today at the December meeting, and since that time, the applicant has submitted revised plans. in response to some of the concerns expressed by the board. The changes included in the currently proposed design include modifications to the ground level facade along 2nd Street. This facade has been revised, including the replacement of the previously proposed gate within the garage opening with a garage door clad in stone. Also, the design of the ground level facade along Meridian Avenue has been revised, including the removal of the previously proposed reinterpreted site wall. This particular change eliminates the need for the associated setback variance. So the currently proposed plan that's before you today does not require any setback variances. They have also, along Meridian, introduced additional areas of solid wall. We believe that the introduction of these solid areas at the ground level is generally consistent with the direction given by several board members at the December meeting. The Meridian Avenue elevation does recall the ratio of solid wall area of the contributing building. The 2nd Street elevation, however, we do have some concerns about. It appears to be one single solid stone-clad wall due to the cladding over the garage door. We are recommending that this particular area be further developed with the introduction of glazing or decorative metal screening similar to the previously proposed design in order to break down the scale and massing of that particular portion of the building. Notwithstanding that concern, staff is supportive of the application and is recommending approval as noted in the draft order. The 2 remaining variances that are required, staff remains supportive of those. This is currently a legal substandard size lot. It is substandard in size of area as well as the minimum width required. Therefore, any new construction on this particular site would require both of these variances. We do believe that is a true hardship and are recommending approval. I am available for any questions board members may have, and if not, we can turn it over to the applicant.
Any questions from the board? No? Okay, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Slavens, address at 3800 Northeast 1st Avenue. I'm joined by Jennifer McConney Gayoso and Victor Bered Jr., Victor Bered Sr. Victor Bered Jr. is the property owner. We have a presentation to show you with the feedback incorporated into our plans and elevations based on our meeting in December. As you may recall, we had originally proposed reconstruction of the east-facing facade of the building, and we had a driveway entrance on the south-facing facade, which is what you see predominantly in this image in front of you. We went back, worked with the client, redesigned, and Jennifer will walk you through our changes.
Hi, everybody. Jennifer McConney with Studio MCG Architecture. And next slide. So we did take your comments from the last meeting. We did remove the rebuilt wall facing Meridian, and we worked with the solid versus fenestration glass based on the historic building that's there now. So what we did was the garage, we really wanted to respect the historic building, so we didn't want a typical garage door there. We could look at an open paneled garage, but this garage, and I have a picture of something similar. These are all the material boards, and in here there's an image of that type of garage door. What it is a stone-clad door, and it's flush with the face of the building. Most garage doors are actually set in, but this garage door is actually flush with the facade. So it would look like a stone panel, which would create that solid on the facade. Next slide. This is a front view. Next slide. And this is the view on Meridian, and in some of the later slides you'll see the existing photos. We also have a kind of a symmetrical view on this side, and we took the existing windows, the window pattern that's on the historic building, and we didn't replicate it, but we have that same kind of rhythm. And then you could see this tree that's there. The tree really is one of the stars of the site, so we want to make sure that's all rendered as it is, how you would see it. So really, you only see the ground floor on this side. Next slide. I'm sorry for the heavy board. I know. And these are some photos of what's existing of the site. Next slide. This is on the top. You see the view from Meridian. So we did. You can see here on the bottom. We did take the same rhythm of the historic windows. Next slide. Front view, and then I think one of the suggestions from the last board was really look at the positive versus the negative on the ground floor and kind of go with that. And that's, I believe, what we did. Next slide. Next slide. And these are just refreshers of the floor plan. We have the entry on Meridian, vehicular entry on Second. All we have on the ground floor is a garage and a small foyer area. Next slide. Second floor, which is the main living space with a guest bedroom. Next slide. Third floor, master, and 2 bedrooms. And then we have the roof deck, which is just a small kind of spa area. And I'll let Tracy handle the rest.
Okay, next slide. Next slide. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
These are our elevations, which just bring together each of the floor plans. As you can see, just entry on the ground floor, main living space on the second level, bedrooms on the third, and roof amenities on the top level. Next slide. And this is another sampling of materials and character ideas that have been incorporated into our design. A lot of this is repeated on the board that we just passed around, but for the audience and viewers at home, you can see the type of fluted glass we're using, stucco treatments, and natural stone. So with that, we hope that we've addressed the comments that you gave us last month and properly incorporated them into this design. It is a unique property because it is on the edge of the historic district. It's fronting 2 multifamily buildings, and it's a design that we had to thoughtfully consider a specimen tree that affected the way that you enter and exit this home and the way that the home is oriented towards the streets that face us on our 2 corners. So, we've done our homework. We have, examples of the other iterations. If you want that reminder, we can pull up those slides. But we think that this product today is the best outcome that we could have hoped for. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Does the board want to put forward any questions to the applicant? No? Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yes. On the city sidewalk.
It's on the east side on Meridian Avenue. It's a capulum tree, and you find those trees all down Meridian Avenue all the way to 15th Street. It is.
Yes.
It's in the swale.
Swale.
But you say that the design was made to be sensitive for that particular tree. So, but did you have like an arborist tree and see if the tree is likely to withstand strong wind? I mean, if it's in good condition or not. We did lose one of those type of trees not long ago on 11th and Meridian, and I'm just wondering, would the design hold up even if the tree is not there?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And Urban Forestry came out there and looked at it, and the tree was fine, and we had to relocate our driveway just because of the tree. So that tree is in good shape. The design will still hold up, obviously, if the tree's not there. Okay. Definitely.
Is that it for questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We'll go ahead and move on to disclosures and public comments. Does the board have any disclosures to make at this time?
And I just want to point out there was an email that was forwarded to the board members at the previous hearing, and the same email was, I believe, forwarded earlier today to board members.
And I should also point out there were a number of support letters that were submitted for the record that we addressed at the first hearing, but I did not recirculate those. They are on the file on the cover sheet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any members of the public on Zoom, please raise your hand. In chambers, please step forward.
Good morning. My name is Jack Finglass, and I live in Mid-Beach. I missed last month's meeting, but I was here for the November meeting. And I must say that, with all due respect, I totally disagree with the presentation that you just saw. I think this project has been misrepresented from the very beginning. It started with the city description of the project found on page 1 of their November 15th report. It says that this is an existing building. I've been doing this for 6 years, and I've never seen in a city report that phrase used. It's either contributing building or non-contributing building. This is an attempt to sweep this building under the rug and into the garbage, as far as I'm concerned. It's basically a travesty. I've been to the building with the owner, who's a very nice gentleman, and I'm a firm believer in caveat emptor. He knew when he bought the building, or he should have known, that it is an historic building, it's a contributing building in an historic district. It's no larger than the corner of this room. It's a very small building, basically wood and stucco. I grant you the wood's in very bad condition, but with a minimum amount of money, it could be easily reconstructed or restored, whatever term you might want to use. This is the last building of its type, 1923, an existing contributing building. The architect and the owner have assumed from the beginning you could just sweep it off the face of the earth. It's one of the last of its type and in not that bad a condition. It can easily be rebuilt for a relatively small amount of money. I met with him and suggested several ways he could build his new building behind the facades on Meridian and 2nd. He obviously has paid no attention to the suggestion, which is, again, his right. But this, remember, is a historic preservation board. We're not a redevelopment board, and that is what this is attempting to do, putting a Miami design district commercial building, basically, in a residential area and making it very much like the Helfman House 2 doors away, which was totally out of scale, totally out of character, totally devoid of any meaning in this district. And by removing this house and not requiring its restoration, we are basically condemning the rest of the district to the same fate. That should not be on your agenda, frankly. This is a travesty. To listen to these people basically state they want a new building, and this is why. I grant you, it may be beautiful, but the scale is wrong. Remember the Secretary of Interior standards. It says many times in there, scale, materials, preservation of character of the neighborhood. Everything that they've said is against that today. So I implore you not to accept the false image that they're trying to give you, that this is a proper preservation project. It's nothing but a new development taking away an historic building that should be saved. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack.
Okay, Mr. Chair, seeing no other members of the public wishing to comment, you can close the public hearing.
We do have one.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I'm very shy. I'm talking to so many people. I'm very microphone shy. I hope it comes out well. I'm Jose Frias. I live in 90 Alton Road, just 2 blocks away from there for the last 22 years, south of 5th for the last 30 years. I used to go with my dog that way to the park that is close by for the last couple of years. I don't go that route because that corner has been very difficult corner to pass by. I think that building is in such a bad shape that if I think it will fall down on itself. I passed by the other day and I saw another single family in the other corner. It's a lot between, and it's a single family. It's about 40 feet high. I think what these people want to do is great. I think the neighborhood, South Sophia, is going to be rewarded by the building and by those people, because I know these people, they are real good. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, Mr. Chair, there's no one on Zoom, so you can close the public hearing and ask the applicant if they would like a rebuttal.
Thank you. Yes. Would just like to briefly rebut Mr. Finglass's comments. As you may recall, we discussed it last month that we had two separate structural engineers come and do an analysis of the structure, and they both determined that the wood has exceeded its useful and usable life, that the property has significant structural damage, water damage, mold, that beyond minor repairs, no real restorative work has ever been done here. And the framing of the wood is generally also undersized for the type of structure that it is, because at the time the engineering controls were not the same in the 20s. So due to the nature and of the deterioration and damage, both of the engineers, and the reports have been submitted for the record, determined that the existing building cannot be salvaged. We worked extensively with Debbie on the idea of reconstruction. You saw a version of it last month. And, at the end of the day, unfortunately, that is not the preferred method in historic preservation. So, and by this board based on the feedback that we got from you. So, we've proposed to you today a building that we think does fit with the character of this block. With the properties both to our west and to our south and east. And Jennifer can speak to you about some of the studies she's done for buildings in the surrounding area, including immediately abutting properties that have explored similar redevelopment ideas. And what we find is that the character of this neighborhood is changing, at least in this specific 2nd Street corridor. And so we hope that that's communicated and understood, and that with this design we've proposed something that's beautiful and acceptable to the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, board member comment. Someone, Kirk, you want to start over here?
Sorry to start out this way, but I think this is an amazing team, and I'm really sorry to say that I find this incredibly disheartening. As someone who has advocated for the designation of historic districts succeed as a collective unit. It's a collection of properties. And I was an advocate for my neighborhood, which is a historic district. If the guy across the street from you or next to you or across the water from you does inappropriate things with a contributing structure, it diminishes what you have, and it diminishes the whole idea of historic preservation. And our last discussion about this, it brought up some existential questions, resiliency questions. There was I think probably 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have hoped that maybe we would have been further along in terms of a vision of what resilient historic districts look like. But last month we talked about the idea of the relationship of a building to the street, and that was part of the discussion with this structure was, yes, it could be reconstructed, but it would not relate to the street in the same way because it would be higher. But then how do you approach the question of raising streets, right? So you're raising streets in historic districts to make the neighborhood more resilient. And if that's the argument that you're using, are you not just, undermining the success of an entire neighborhood by raising a street? It doesn't make any sense. Obviously, you can't lift houses and streets at the same time. But I would argue that, you have to start somewhere, right? My other concern here is that this really is, such a unique property. It's 1926 hurricane, first developed neighborhood of Miami Beach, and so little of that fabric remains. I think we're really doing a disservice to this historic district and to the city and to the community not to advocate for the history of this structure to be able to move forward in some way. I think we could try harder. It's a beautiful design. This is the design that I would say is great in an area that was not a historic district. This is, and unlike a lot of other structures that come before this board and projects where there's not really sufficient material to evaluate where you move from, this is there. It's there for it's a three-dimensional piece of history predating the 1926 hurricane, going back to the very pioneering beginnings of that neighborhood that we're being asked to approve demolishing. And in my mind, what we're looking at here, it does not relate to what's there now and what component of this neighborhood contributes to the district as a whole. The other thing is south of 5th Street, which I think is an incredible neighborhood. I think has done a really, really wonderful job. I think it's a wonderful neighborhood to stroll around and actually see how preservation can work in tandem with new development. And unlike other areas of Miami Beach, south of 5th, you see bungalows, wooden bungalows from the 20s that were incorporated into new additions. And it's not easy to do. None of this is easy. I think the team here is fully capable of doing something, but to erase the history, to me, I think it's a really bad direction to go in terms of this board's role to protect the historic character of the district. And again, for me, as a preservationist and as someone who advocates for my own community to have a successful historic district, I don't understand what that precedent means. If you're going to come in and say, my property is too low, in the future it's going to flood, and therefore I need to demolish my structure, I'm going to replace it with something of the time, the streets are going to be raised, or the property is going to be raised, it's not going to relate to the street. I don't understand the way that we're addressing those questions. I personally, as a owner of a historic property, I don't understand what message that's supposed to send to me in terms of what a historic district looks like in the future, because I don't think you can make the argument, any argument, that this structure is not important, that it's not really important to the character of this historic district and is not really important to having an appreciation of the history, architectural heritage of Miami Beach. I was happier with the other presentation last month, where at least there was an effort of incorporating some of the existing fabric or design into the new structure. To completely erase it, I think, is a travesty. And I'm really sorry for the strong words, because, again, I think this is a great team. And I really do think it's a beautiful design. I just think, at least as far as what I consider to be my responsibility on this board, I don't think erasing an invaluable piece of history like this is what I see my role to be on this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirk. Who would like to go next? Any takers? Nancy? Or not yet?
I can talk about it.
Okay.
When I opened the book during the week and I came to this, I was like, wow. I love the whole idea of what it has become. And, you know, I appreciate my friend's opinion on it, but I think this is unique. Maybe it doesn't fit into the obvious scale of what's happening. I never saw it in person. I've only seen it in this this type, but I was fascinated with it. I thought it was a wonderful idea, but I hadn't seen whatever is around the edges. I think, I don't know why I hadn't seen it before. I was not here a couple of times a while ago. I don't know. All I can say is I think it's unique. I don't know what's next to it. Maybe somebody who appreciates it can describe what it is, what happens next to it. And the other thought I had is that I just don't know if that neighborhood is changing to accommodate this. That was never. So I hated to go first because I don't know enough about it. I'm trying to express why I like it. So that's it.
Thank you, Nancy. Ray?
My concern right now is the fact that there's 2 engineering reports that said this building was not savable. And we didn't, back in November, say, I'm sorry, if you can't save it, you need to replicate it. I mean, we weren't strong enough back then. They gave us a presentation. We kept saying, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. And they've done exactly what this board asked them to do from last time to this time. I agree with Kurt. I liked what was presented last time better than this time, but they took our recommendations as a board and brought it forth today. And I think that if we're now going to backpedal, then we've done a travesty. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Ray. Stuart?
Yes, I agree that it's a beautiful building, but it's in a historic preservation district, and there's a 1920s building on the site. And I recall from the prior meeting that we discussed preserving the facade in some way. and what came out instead was to preserve that there's more of the solid walls on the sides, but I thought that we were actually looking for something that preserves some of the style of those facades. I understand if the whole building cannot be reused, but a lot of redevelopment sites incorporate elements of the prior structure. And I know we're sort of, that this is a debatable issue. When you're talking about historic preservation, you're not supposed to build a new building that looks exactly like the old building. But this particular building that's on the site currently is an important historical reminder of when this neighborhood was built. And you do feel by strolling past buildings like that in this neighborhood that you're in a place with a long history. And the proposal before us today it erases that history completely. And if we were just a design review board to pass nicely designed buildings, this proposal would pass. But we are a historical preservation board, And the historic preservation goals of the city are stated in our comprehensive land use plan. We're supposed to encourage the retention, protection, and rehabilitation and continued use of contributing buildings. I don't think that this proposal satisfies any of the historic preservation concerns of the city's comprehensive plan and of this board. So I would agree with Kurt that it just doesn't satisfy this city's policy needs with preserving our history.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I think that Kirk really made a powerful and important comment about the role of historic preservation in the city and the role of this board and kind of the emotional touchstone that buildings like this can be, and historic buildings in general are. I think when I first saw this proposal last time, it was just a month ago, you guys, I think you did a really good job at kind of taking the board's recommendation from last time to this time into account. You basically did restructure the massing of the first floor. The idea was that it shouldn't be all glass on the first floor. The historic building is not all glass on the first floor. That it should be solid with punched windows, and you went back to that. I think you did a much better job than putting a kind of kind of caricature of the old building on the street, which wouldn't have served either the owner or the history of the building. And I guess, Debbie, I had a question because obviously the professional, and this board relies on professionals in the structure of its arguments, in the nature of its conclusions, and we've talked about the two structural engineering reports that were professional reports, and in your opinion as well, from the staff, the professional staff opinion, I think you also had expressed a kind of sad resolution, a sad kind of assumption about where this existing building is and whether this is the building to fall on your sword for or not. And so I didn't know whether or not you had any kind of. I was looking to see if they were in the reports here, but I think you had kind of eloquently discussed it in previous reports. Maybe you could refresh our memories to that.
Yeah. In the interest of time, I didn't reiterate the presentation and everything that was in the report presented in December. But no, this is not an ideal situation for a historic district. The purpose of historic districts is to preserve and restore historic buildings. This is a building staff is very familiar with. I have been on the site. I have been on the property. I've looked inside the building. I did not go inside because of the conditions of the building. But there, my visual layman's observations were consistent with the two structural engineering reports that said this building cannot be saved. From my visual observations, I did not see any original fabric that could be saved. The wood is rotting, right? You can kick holes through the wood. And there are holes through the building currently. So at that point, that was when we, further evaluated the property and the project that was proposed and determined that our recommendation to this board was to approve the demolition of the building. And at that point, we did discuss and we did think about, what would reconstruction look like? The city recently adopted, not at the time this application was submitted, but going forward, we have adopted the Secretary of Interior standards for reconstruction. Staff did, although it's not part of this, it wasn't at the time part of this, the official review criteria, review a possible reconstruction in accordance with those criteria. We do not believe that it satisfies that criteria. We also took into consideration the current, Florida Building Code and what changes would be required as part of a reconstruction to the original design. Again, we had some concerns that it would not be appropriate to reconstruct the building. But I feel very confident that at this point, which is upsetting, and I'm not Mr. Finglass, please keep your comments to yourself. I do not believe the building can be saved. So the question for this board, which is, somewhat of a philosophical question, is should reconstruction be required? Staff has given you our opinion. It was in much further detail at the December meeting, but I think other than saying restoration, because restoration technically is restoring and repairing what is there, the conversation turns to should it be rebuilt with new material.
Right, and that would look very different given the kind of elevational requirements from the environmental perspective and the scale of the building, which has been noted several times by the public and by Kirk and others. It's quite small, so any changes to the scale, any changes to its elevation would be quite significant. Changes would be quite a significant change to the entire envelope of the building. It's not something that you wouldn't notice. It would be
correct. And part of the uniqueness here is the size of the lot. It is a very small lot, leaving little room for transitioning to a higher elevation.
So. Is there anything because I think one of the really important aspects of this particular site is the way it's making us think. It's a contributing building on the site now that's in a state in which, numerous experts have said is not able to be reconstructed. It's bringing us to our kind of to our most philosophical moment of what it means to preserve and what it means to preserve a building, to preserve a neighborhood, to preserve, a property owner's rights, to preserve the environment, to preserve all these things are coming together. Is there any? Is not stating what we're doing with this, but is there anything that you think we can do about our position, because this is something that I think about a lot, like what this future is going to look like, but how we can strengthen the resolve of the urge to preserve as we make it as we move forward, because I think going back to kind of what Ray mentioned, we've already been down a path with this project for a while, and that path has been one that's brought us to experts, that brought us the expertise has brought design solutions. Those design solutions have been revised, and we're kind of already down a road that we have made for ourselves. And I think we owe the public, we owe the owner, we owe them a response, the architect. But I was wondering whether there's some way in which we could, as a board, catch this kind of thing earlier, so that we're not catching it at the last minute, in terms of it being a finished design waiting for approval, but that it comes much earlier, even when people are purchasing the properties in the future, that they're aware of this.
That's a great point and a great question. The city does have a preliminary evaluation process. And for projects like this, maybe we could discuss this after the agenda items. This board could give a general recommendation to staff to encourage for dramatic projects for the loss of a contributing building, which this is. that maybe they would like to consider the preliminary evaluation process first before submitting a full application.
Right, and that maybe we have a ability to see the list of people who are purchasing contributing buildings when they change hands, and they come before us, and maybe a letter comes from the board or something. And I know that's not for here, but I think we're in this moment, and that we will not be this passionate about it after whatever happens. But I think to address the question, to kind of take there's a process that we've undergone as a board. Even I think it came up even before I started on the board, and this project was in play. And I would recommend that we would move forward with the process, because this is something that's gone too far out of the station, I think, for us to really go back and kind of kind of change the rules in midway, I think, for this applicant, for this person. But I think it has brought up so many important kind of elements of what we need to be thinking about. So I guess that's where I stand on this.
John, thank you for that. Laura?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's, you're my favorite. I shouldn't probably say that, but it's the truth, so I'll just say it.
Thanks, Laura.
It's beautiful and just so creative, and it's like 2,500 square foot lot. I know it's impossible to work with. I wasn't here in December, so I'm not. I don't know exactly what happened in the conversation, but I'm pretty liberal as well in my interpretation of the Secretary of Interior standards, what contextual, what scale means. My preference, and I do respect the structural experts, not an engineer, but if there was, some way to be creative to at least maintain the primary street frontage, it might be impossible in this project, I don't know, but I think if anyone can do it, I do think it's you. That would be my preference, again, and I apologize I wasn't here in December, so I didn't have an opportunity to review this project prior, but I do think that although beautiful, the primary street frontage, for me, it's a bit out of scale, and I'm not sure if it really contextualizes not only the history of this particular 1926 building, but also the historic district as a whole, so maybe there's some sort of creative middle ground. I don't think reconstruction, I'm not a fan of that. I don't think it's appropriate in this circumstance or in most circumstances for Miami Beach. But those are my comments, so thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I think we've heard a lot of good comments here today, and it's definitely a touchy item. Thinking about the process of rebuilding it, elevating it, adding stairs to it, which would reduce the usable area of the building further. That reality as an option, I have a hard time seeing who would do that. Perhaps a neighbor would purchase it and use it as a guest house, maybe, but what are we to do for the current neighbors who don't want to walk by that corner in the meantime? Wait for the person who's going to be just the right one to rebuild the building and then be a steward of a new building that's like an old building? It just doesn't square up. I just don't see how that works, and it's it's a shame. I love these wood buildings, and I love the scale, and I love the fact that it's a little duplex, a tiny duplex, and it really speaks to the history of Miami Beach, and the early density that you see just across the street. Yes, that big multifamily building was a big mistake. I think we would all agree. But just east of that, we see those 4 little apartment buildings that retain that kind of unique density, and I'd like to think that this building, while it's a different type than those, they're kind of related, and there is a kind of critical mass right there at that intersection of historic buildings. So it really is unfortunate and tragic, and I wonder, when was this building last inhabited? I think John makes a great point. Like, how can we prevent this from happening? Does anybody know how long has this building been uninhabited?
That's a good question. It's been in terrible, deplorable shape for quite some time. I would think the last probably at least 5 years, if not more.
That's correct. It was used as some version of a vacation rental, like a very inexpensive one. And then once the building was, unlivable, they stopped renting it out. There was a squatter living there as late as last year, before the owner purchased the property in March of this year, or I guess in 2022. But it hasn't been properly inhabited for a very, very long time.
Yeah. So I think that as a board, we should take some action to prevent this from happening again. But here we are. That building is not going to stand on its own. The only chance for that building to survive in some ways is for someone to rebuild it. And you can't rebuild exactly what's there by code. You just can't. So, I'm supportive of where this project is. I appreciate the architects taking the board comment and integrating it in a kind of creative and inventive way and putting something out there that at the very least is going to marks a new moment and a new building type for Miami Beach. And this kind of urban house that we're seeing pop up there, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a pretty good thing. And I think that the density that it suggests does retain part of the history of the existing fabric that's there. And so
The small lot.
the small lot, the house on the small lot, I think that remains. And so that part of this existing building lives on in the new project. Okay, so that ends board comments. Would someone like to make a motion?
We lost a board member. While we wait for her to return, if it should please the board and through the chair, we do have the earlier versions of the renderings if you'd like to see them for context. I think, it kind of helps you understand how this conversation got to this place. So if we could pull up slide number 24, please.
Last month we did submit one that was a portion that was slightly recreated.
Just for context, that's what the inside of the building looks like in the lower right corner. Next slide. So this was a version from last month that showed more glass and glazing on the 2nd Street side, and on the Meridian Avenue side, which you can see on the lower right, there was a reconstruction of the facade of the building. Next slide. Here's a daylight version, and next slide. So this was the reconstruction of the Meridian Avenue facade. It's not exact, but it was intended to create an entrance for the pedestrian that was reminiscent and as close to the existing building as we could accomplish. Next slide. Next slide. And this was our first iteration, which staff didn't love, and so we had presented what you saw just in the prior slides, where we had the reconstruction of the facade on both the Meridian and the 2nd Avenue side. This design required variances. It had our driveway on the Meridian Avenue side next to the calophyllum tree, and urban forestry did not allow us to have a driveway where we had proposed it. So this didn't work from an engineering standpoint for the driveway and the entrance and the tree, but this was an attempt at trying to maintain this historic original character that we had talked through with the board last month. So that's the end of the slides.
Okay, seeing that we've recovered a full board, would someone like to make a motion?
First off, I'd like to say thank you for coming back and representing all the things that you have done to try and satisfy this board, from preserving things, running into problems with driveway positions and everything else, and realizing that you have done everything you can to really try and satisfy everybody on this board. And everybody has a slightly different, opinion and approach. I personally liked your presentation last month better than this month, but I think we've moved our way down to where I think this month's presentation is what the rest of the board, based on their comments last month, suggested. So I will make a motion to accept what you presented today.
Do we have a second?
So that's a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness.
Didn't realize you I went away for a minute.
Yes, you did.
Oh, thanks.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a motion and a second. Let me call the roll. Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
No.
Ms. Liebman?
Yes.
Mr. Pascal?
No.
Ms. Weinstein-Berman?
No.
Mr. Breslin?
Yes.
Okay, so that,
Doesn't get us
oh, Mr. Chair.
Lopez, yes.
Okay, so that motion fails.
Fails.
So,
We do have the other iterations of the plans. We are trying to figure out what this board wants. There are different opinions, and unfortunately, we need 5 agreeing opinions in order for us to proceed. We're open to the idea of going back to something, or taking your feedback again and trying this one more time. But we want to make sure that we do take this in the right direction.
And also, I just want to point out, and I'm going to cry a little bit, but we started this last February. I mean, we have done the amount of design time that the client has paid for is it's just too much for a single family home. And I understand it's a historic district, and nobody needs to be sad about him. But it's we've done a lot of work. I mean, this is probably one of our biggest time projects this whole year, and it's a single family residence. We've done everything that we could possibly do. He's up for this option or last month's option. I just, I think we just, if you could please help us come to this, because, and there's other lots around. What I'm worried about is that you might lose that fabric because you have a lot next door, which is vacant. You have and 2 other lots to the north that have already asked me to do studies of the whole thing. So, I mean, I want this one because I think this is a much nicer, beautiful project. But you also don't want another Quartz. So I think just want to put that out there.
We'll hear from Stewart and Kirk.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you put the slide up of the first proposal, and I understand that you modified it because the staff was not supportive. I personally like that one best. It does preserve some of the facades design, so you have a sense of the building that was there. I would like something with that feel without a setback variance. And I understand that particular design, and what I liked about it too is your new building seems to be sort of detached and back from those facades. I like that type of design, and I think it is sensitive to the historic, the historic structure and the neighborhood. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, and that's what's lost in the proposal today. And it's not a replication of the building that's there. It's incorporating elements of the building that's there, and I think that works from a historic preservation perspective better than just totally demolishing it, saying, oh, well, we were not supposed to replicate, so let's demolish. I think it's better to incorporate elements of an original building rather than just demolishing it.
Thank you, Stuart. We'll hear from Kirk, and then Ray, if you want to say something too. While we have already had a vote here, we're entertaining this discussion because it's a unique situation. And I'll just ask Nick to verbalize how we might proceed from this discussion.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. So the motion that just failed, The effect of that was to deny the applicant's application. So if the board would like to reconsider that motion, a member of the prevailing side, which in this case would be one of the nays, would need to make a motion to reconsider. That motion to reconsider requires a second, and the board would need to vote on it. If the motion to reconsider passes, then the application is back before you as it was prior to the original motion.
Thanks. So we'll take Kirk, and then we'll go back.
So, I mean, I agree with Stuart. I think option B is a win-win. You maintain the historical references, and your design's beautiful. And not only that, I think the references to the original building, I think they make a beautiful statement as well. I think it not only for the property itself, but from the street view, I see that as a win-win. I think the question for me is it doable? I mean, I would support that direction wholeheartedly. I just don't know if it's doable, because you're saying that maybe it isn't, maybe it is. I don't know if we have enough to move forward.
The design you saw last month is doable. It just requires a setback variance.
The design B, though,
we could
the
pull out
references.
slide number 20, slide number 26 and 27.
Yeah, that was the one that there were serious concerns about the calophyllum tree.
The 27
maybe
was the one, I'm sorry, 29 had concerns, if we can pull up the slides. 29 had the concerns about the calophyllum tree.
And that's something that Urban Forester will be negotiating.
Well, it was more than a concern.
So this is, actually, leave this slide up, please. This one and the next one shows the driveway layout, which is helpful. The next slide.
I think in essence, I'm trying to find out if the board would support moving forward on that, subject to staff review on the conditions for the tree. And I mean, is that something that's approvable at this point?
So we have been advised by Urban Forestry that they will not approve this.
I thought that today's design was going to switch so that the opening was going to be on Second Street for the garage, and that we were considering taking the facade that's currently on the south side and putting it on the east side so that you could make that work, and the east side facade on the south side.
So we do need the driveway in. So when the building is very small. The existing building is very small. When you put an 8-foot by 8-foot wide hole for the driveway and the garage door, it makes a very large hole into the historic building, which it didn't look good. So how we countered that was, Meridian also is a very prominent street. So we took the historic, we have that side of the historic building and really chose to recreate that side, the Meridian side, with the tree. And so that was last month's version.
26 and 27.
Yeah, and that allows, historic Meridian with a historic building that's on, that's, which slide is it?
26 and 27.
26 and 27, yeah.
Is the parking spot a zoning requirement, or it's something that the owner wants?
It's a zoning requirement to have parking, yeah.
And street parking can't accommodate that, offset that zoning requirement?
No.
Property have.
So this was last month's.
Right. This and the one before it was the Second Avenue side. This is the Meridian side. So this is the entrance to the historic district, which was why we preserved the facade on this side.
And the building across the street, across Meridian, is historic. Meridian is historic because we have the historic treescape. And then on Second Street, you have all the new buildings. So we said, let's keep our historic side on Meridian. And that's why, and we placed the building so it's kind of framed by the tree. And then it also, we made the pedestrian entry off of Meridian. Vehicular
Ray
entry
also wanted to add something.
Yeah, well, I knew that the plan that Stuart liked wasn't buildable, and this plan that you just showed is, and you've got the historic part on Meridian. I thought that was an excellent plan last month, and I wasn't looking for any changes. But all of you input to try and have something done. And what they brought forth today, I don't think is as good as what we had last month. This is a give and take process, and it is a small lot. And I think what they presented to us last month was an excellent use of new and old and preserving the best they could of what there was there. And if one of you that was a nay would like to make a motion to bring this back up, I think if we turned around and maybe made a motion to go back to last month's plan, we might be able to pass that.
But there were two plans last month. Can I interject? I think there were two plans, right? There was this one that we just saw, 26 and 27, right? And then there was a different one that was all glazing on the corner, correct?
No, there's just one plan.
Which is the one with
Yes, from the one that they just
26 and
showed.
27.
Yes.
The other one was unbuildable, according to Debbie. With the forestry and the trees. So they originally talked about that, but planning said no, that can't be built. So we never got to look at that plan, except we just saw
And
it.
we tried with urban forestry. We thought they'll be fine. We've driven over plenty of tree roots. No, they would not give up.
But 26 and 27 reincorporate the Mediterranean style.
On Meridian. Only. On Meridian. And it requires a variance. On Meridian, and there's no other way to do it because it's more like a wall. And if it didn't require a variance, it would be pushed up too close to the building, the new building.
I do think procedurally, if the board, because I see the board engaging in the substance of the application again, and I think if the board is inclined to reconsider, I think this would be a good time for a motion to reconsider.
From one of the dissenters. Right?
Correct.
So that would be.
Is the parking true though? Is that correct? They
So
can't
there is
offset a parking on-street parking?
There is a parking requirement for a single-family home in this district, which is 2 parking spaces. However, since it's located in a historic district, they're not required to provide the parking on site. They can provide the parking within a certain distance from the property, or they could pay a fee in lieu of providing the parking.
Is that something that ownership
Needs a parking space. I mean, they need it. They're buying this property. They're building it. They need parking.
I would consider moving to reopen and continuing for changes to the plan that bring back the historic elements. That's the direction I'd like to see it going.
Okay, so for now, we're going to have a motion to reconsider. Mr. Reed, is that correct?
Well, it would be a two-part motion.
I
A
don't
motion to
think we can
reconsider
do a
and
two-part.
continue.
The reconsideration needs to be clean. So is that a motion to reconsider?
Well, yeah, I would hate to send them packing and back to the drawing board and have to apply again. But which isn't buildable? Well, there were 2 previous designs. There was the one with the facades on both sides, and the reason why it wasn't buildable because of the location of the garage on Meridian Avenue. But then they modified it and brought it back with the garage on 2nd Street, but without any historic elements on 2nd Street. I'd like to see a proposal with...
I think what we've been advised is that if we want to reconsider it, we have to have a motion to reconsider, and then we can continue the conversation. Is that right?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
But I would move to reconsider for it to go in that direction of modifications, not just to give another bite at the apple and then for somebody to flip a vote.
Well, Mr. Reed, you could, if the reconsideration passes, you could then make a motion to continue. But you can't address the application unless the board reconsiders its last vote.
I would move to reconsider.
Thank you. Is there a second? Nancy? Okay.
One of those, or can I do?
You can, yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, let me call the roll on this one. Mr. Stewart? Yes. Ms. Liebman?
Yes.
Mr. Pascal?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Breslin?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Okay. That passes. So now we can discuss the application and what changes you would like to see.
Would it help if I brought the slides back up? Okay, so why don't
Yes.
why don't we start with slide number 22. So this is a contextual image of what's happening at the intersection. It shows you the four buildings at the corner. So you have the house, the Cosmopolitan building, the courts, and then sort of the contextual view of Meridian. Next slide. Again, this is what the front-facing south view is from our property across 2nd Street to these two large-scale multifamily buildings. Next slide. This is the existing house. Next slide. Okay, so this is the version that we presented last month, which has the glazing on the 2nd Street side, and in the following slides you'll see the Mediterranean vernacular style on the Meridian side.
And there's no issue with this being built. This can be built.
And we can change the treatment of that garage door. I mean, maybe that's the place where we
more solid.
Incorporate the solid feature that you saw in this presentation we gave today, where then it goes back to the nod for the solid garage door, the solid feature of the vernacular style, and then we have the more of the homage happening on the Meridian side, and that's something that maybe we could work on with staff's direction if this is the plan that has the most support. Next slide. Again, we could solidify that opening, so then you do have that solid block vernacular happening on 2nd Street. And then the next slide, which is the more reconstruction or nod to the vernacular style, but in the construction of this wall facade and pedestrian entrance.
Yes, and this one, it's more like a wall, and it would require a setback variance, but that's because the lot is so small.
And then those are the new images. The next slide is just the ground floor level plan, which I don't think is necessarily as important, but I can show it to you just for the comparison. As you see, we maintain the solid frontage along Meridian, but for the pedestrian entrance. And then the 2nd Street side, which is the higher intensity side facing the back of those two multifamily buildings, is where you have the garage entrance. And you keep the pedestrian on the pedestrian shaded street that is Meridian with the tree. And these plans are in the record. Staff has reviewed them. If this is acceptable with the proposed change of addressing that 2nd Street side that we can work on with staff, I think that's something that we could contemplate doing today if you're amenable.
I think we may have a couple questions about this. Thank you for sharing that. I'll start. The wall on the sidewalk, is that a freestanding wall, like a garden wall, or does it have a roof also?
It is tied back to the building, and there's a trellis on top of it. So between the two structures, there's a trellis, fully open, but it's...
But you have a beam that ties it back to the structure, which gives it extra strength and rigidity, but it doesn't go up any further. It doesn't have a roof over it. It's essentially a kind of garden wall.
Yes, and that allows us to keep the historic building or facade at the level of the street where it is now.
Okay. Are there other questions, Ray?
So if that was not tied back to the building and it was actually considered a wall, there wouldn't be a setback requirement, correct?
It would still be a variance because it's too tall to be considered a wall.
Oh, and it's too tall because we're requesting it, actually. We're requesting to
yes.
So yeah. I think, Stuart, I know that you have a lot of issues with variances, but sometimes if you're getting what you want, which is to reconstruct what was there so that you have Meridian showing that historic nature that all of Meridian has, and then you've got the contemporary on 2nd when you're looking across at all of the other tall buildings. To me, this is an absolute plus for all of us. I think this could be the the point that makes us be able to say yes. But it does require a variance, and I think you need to seriously think about that.
Well, it's not that I'm just opposed to variances. Variance is fine so long as the requirements of the law are there to grant the variance. And in this case, it may be there because you may not be able to make a use of redeveloping the property without incorporating a historic element of the property. And so that setback variance in order just to preserve a facade may be necessary to have a reasonable use of the property. And looking at the criteria about special conditions and circumstances don't result from their actions. They didn't build the original building. That it doesn't confer any special privileges on them that aren't enjoyed by other people in the district. I think when you look at the criteria for the granting of a variance in order to preserve that facade, that setback variance may be warranted under the review that's established by the code. So there.
Okay. Well, and I think based on that, I think, well, unless there's some other comments right now, I would like to make a motion that we go back to what we looked at last month and that we approve what was brought to us last month. And why I think it's better is because they brought us this month and we didn't like it. So I think, they went too far based on what we gave them, but I think it now gives us the point of saying what we had last month was perfect, and I'd like to make the motion that we approve what was presented to us last month. I don't think that we have to really look at the garage because they're two different streets. You've got this street, which is all historic. You've got this street that's all contemporary, and I don't think you have to wrap anything around the corner to make it I think the way you presented it was perfect. So I'd like to make that motion if there's a second. Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, I think that, Kirk, were you getting ready to say something too? I wasn't sure if we missed it.
I was just going to interject that, based on, this is just my input, there's already a motion and a second, but it just seems like to demolish an existing contributing structure, going back to last month, I think the discussion was to have a historical reference on both sides of the corner, and I understand that there's been roadblocks, I guess. And right now we're talking about the idea of, on 2nd Street, replacing historical fabric just with solid something. And to me, I'm not going to be on this board in a month, but to me that seems so insubstantial. A solid what? I don't understand that, and it seems like, again, a historic structure. I don't even know if Debbie, I don't know if anybody knows what that means, what that's going to be, and again, I stand by how I felt last month, which was that the corner deserves a treatment that respects the historical fabric. It's not that I wouldn't. I would love if you were proposing any option, an option C or D, that somehow respected the historical fabric on both facades, with or without a garage. I would be 1,000% supportive.
So
Thank you,
just
Kirk.
to answer your question, I believe the motion on the table is to approve the design that was presented previously at the December 11th meeting. Those plans are part of the record, and they're dated September 6th, 2022, for anyone who's listening, without any changes, without the introduction of a solid portion within the garage. The applicant did proffer that, but that was not the motion that was made.
And for that reason, I'd like to ask to withdraw the motion.
I'll amend my motion to have a solid garage door if that's more amenable to the other board members, because that part to me doesn't make a difference. So if that makes a difference for getting a yes vote, I'm happy to make that amendment. Nancy, would you change your second to that?
Yes.
Thank you.
At this point, anything.
And I would just ask so that the record is clear that these plans, which were presented at the December 11th meeting of the board. Those are in the record for this file.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second.
In a second.
And can I
Should we-
comment in case he might want to
Last chance
amend
for
it again?
comments.
Because we could be back in the same position where we have a denial, because I think Kurt's concern and mine are not just that it will be solid like the original structure, but it will actually have, and I think that was the conversation we were having earlier, that they were to explore options that it would also have the style, not just that it would be solid, but it would have the Mediterranean style that we're losing on the Second Street. So if there were a way to preserve the style of the facade, then I'm in support. But if it's just to say without any clear direction it's going to be solid, I'm like Kurt. What does that really mean? I'd rather have it continued, that we would have a plan that shows exactly what that solid
I'll withdraw my motion. Nancy, you can withdraw your second and move to continue it to next meeting so that we can actually see how you're going to do the garage door. There seems to be a question of how that's going to be. I'd be happy to let staff do it, but it seems to me like you're not going to get a positive vote here, and you don't want to not have a positive vote.
Yeah, let me just throw this out, because I was thinking about both Mr. Breslin and Mr. Reed's comments. I think it's interesting. I think one of the opportunities here, because I don't know how, it's a good question. I don't know how you make a garage door look mission style or Mediterranean masonry vernacular style. Making it solid would certainly do that. Potentially making it wood would potentially do that. But I noticed on their design that was presented last month, they have a decorative screen. Mm-hmm. So maybe that decorative screen could be redesigned in a manner which kind of recalls the geometry of the facade along Meridian. That might be a nice poetic way to recapture. It's not a literal interpretation.
We would
but
be
that
glad to
could
do
be
that.
an option that might be interesting. Just throwing that out
Right,
there.
right. But I think at this point in time it has to be continued because I don't think it's enough a positive vote here. And I think you don't want, if you get turned down, 6 months before you can come back, something like that.
Correct.
So I'm really looking to be able to move this forward. And if it takes coming back next month to actually show what you're going to do on that one side to come around the corner, I'm willing to make the motion to continue.
So we had a motion and a second. Are we not to vote on that?
He withdrew the motion.
I withdrew it.
He did withdraw his motion. So, what's that?
Because I can tell by the number of people here.
Straw poll?
What we could do is
and
let's have a friendly. Let's have a what do you call it? A friendly
straw poll.
Mr. Chair.
Let's have a straw poll.
Can we listen to Nick for a moment?
On what question would there be a straw poll? On whether to.
I think there should be a straw poll on the motion that was made and then subsequently withdrawn.
And the last version of that motion was to approve the prior design plus the solid garage, correct?
Correct.
I believe it was the solid garage door.
I thought that might possibly garner enough votes.
Okay. Would you like to take the straw poll, Debbie?
But if we're just doing a straw poll, can't we do a straw poll of a modified version of that seems to be more amenable to people, where it's the last version with a garage door that reflects what Debbie mentioned was kind of reflects the mission style of the original building.
But would they have to come back, or would we let staff work with that? That's the question.
We'd let staff work with them on that door.
Then that straw poll would be okay. Otherwise, we'd be continuing. All right.
Okay, so with the metal gate rather than the solid.
Well, it could be a solid wall behind.
Yes, metal gate, yes. We
Okay.
can do a straw poll on any topic that we want.
That's right.
So we're just doing this to see whether we need to undo these other things.
Right.
Or not.
This is informal and non-binding. Right.
So then can I restate it, and then we do the straw poll? So the straw poll would be on going to last month's presentation with redesigning the garage door paneling or what screening to staff's recommendation.
Am I still on your motion?
You can second.
We don't have to.
Why don't we call the roll?
Let me call the roll. Mr. Stewart? Mr. Reed? Ms. Liebman?
Sort of.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me.
No, I said sort of. I mean, I like the idea of redesigning the garage door, but I don't know why we're stopping at the garage door. There's a whole street frontage. I wanted to.
We're looking for a yes. So we have one.
It's a partial. It's a yes and a no. I'm yes and no.
Okay. Ms. Liebman?
I think I'm still a yes. I can't.
Mr. Pascal?
No.
Mr. Breslin? Yes. Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Ms. Weinstein Berman?
Yes, but I would still also like to hear the other board members to see if they're amenable. But I do want to, my preference obviously is to preserve any historic structure. That's not the reality here today. So I would appreciate if we could continue the discussion to address other concerns. But I am supportive.
But I counted 5. Yes. So on that straw poll, we got 5 yeses. If that were a motion, and it would pass.
Yes, so now I will make a motion to go to last month's presentation with staff working with the architect on redesigning the garage facade to bring a little bit of the Mediterranean style back to the garage door. And from beyond that, from my standpoint, it's good.
Do we have a
Nancy, are you seconding that?
All day.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let me call the roll. Mr. Reed?
No.
Ms. Weinstein Berman?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Yes. Mr. Pascal?
No.
Ms. Liebman?
Yes.
Mr. Breslin?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Thank
wait.
you. Appreciate the extra
We're not
time.
done. We do have the variances now. So the project that was approved requires 3 variances. Those 3 variances are for the lot area, the lot width, and the setback. Now, the setback was described in last month's staff report and is part of the record, but let me just reiterate that last variance. It is a variance to exceed by 2 feet 8 inches a side facing a street setback in order to construct the reconstructed wall at a setback of 2 feet 4 inches. And again, this is the Meridian Avenue side. So those are the 3 variances. We would need a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, let me call the roll. Mr. Pascal?
No.
Ms. Weinstein Berman?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Yes. Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Breslin?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Okay, that passes.
Thank you very much. I hope your next one's easier.
I can't believe he didn't support it.
Okay, so our final regular application today is HPB 220547. This is 818 Lincoln Road. An application has been filed requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the installation of retractable canopy structures at the 2nd and 3rd level roof decks and the introduction of an outdoor bar counter. Staff would note that this particular building, the design of this building, was approved by the board in 2015. The existing new building closely recalls and has been reinterpreted from the previously existing 1937 Russell Pancoast design building on Lincoln Road. The second and third levels of the structure do step back from Lincoln Road, approximately 32 feet at the second level and 70 feet at the third level. The applicant is now requesting approval for the introduction of two 11-foot tall retractable metal louver canopy structures at the upper level roof decks fronting onto Lincoln Road. Staff has no objection in concept to the introduction of the canopies within this outdoor area. Staff does, however, have some concern relative to the impact of the structures as currently proposed. Staff would note that these structures are at the northernmost extreme on both levels, and it is currently proposed. We believe they will be highly visible from Lincoln Road. So in order to lessen the adverse visual impacts that we believe these canopies will have on the surrounding historic district, we are requesting that these structures be set back a minimum of 5 feet from the inside of the existing parapet walls. Additionally, the proposed outdoor bar counter and back bar are to be located at the westernmost portion of the second level. We would recommend that back bar portion and associated fixtures not exceed the height of the bar counter itself, because as currently designed, that entire back bar structure will be highly visible, and it's, we do not believe that would be appropriate to the character of Lincoln Road. But in summary, we're very supportive of the project and are recommending approval subject to the conditions in our draft order.
Thank you. Good morning for another 30 seconds. Chair and honorable members of the Historic Preservation Board, my name is Ian Bachekov with Ackerman Law Office at 98 Southeast 7th Street. I'm here with, on behalf of Golden Era Hospitality LLC, which is the tenant and operator in the premises that we're applying for these certificate of appropriateness. Here with me is the principal, Mr. Khalifa here, our architect, Patricia Duran, as well as Glenda Villarreal, who is representative of the trellis manufacturer, and my associate, Cecilia Torres Toledo. As you've heard from Ms. Tackett, we're here requesting a certificate of appropriateness for design review approval of a retractable trellis, two actually on the second and third floors of this property at 818 Lincoln Road. Just as a little bit more background, we were at the planning board towards the end of last year to obtain a conditional use approval for this venue, which is going to be called Oro and Elixir. It's a restaurant and lounge concept by Mr. Khalifa. We've prepared a presentation. Can we get it up on the screen? Here we go. Next slide, please. So just to situate ourselves, the property sits right in the middle of Lincoln Road on the south side of Lincoln Road. And as we know, this is a CD3 zoning district. And next slide, please. The property itself is a non-contributing structure. It was new construction built in 2018. As Ms. Tackett mentioned, it was here before the board, getting approved in 2015 to be a 3-story structure, which was built back on the second and third floor so that you wouldn't see those higher floors as you do from the rear from Lincoln Lane South there on the right side. You can see the full height of the building. Next slide, please. So from this angle, it's much easier to see where we have that little red pinpoint, the step back terraces, so you can see how they're laid out there. To the extent that the venue is on the second and third floor, we would be using the terrace on the second and the third floor. There's nothing going up on the roof of the third floor there. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about the venue. It is a restaurant concept on the second floor called Oro, which is going to be high class. Think a lot like the neighbor Mila. Top of the line foods, menus, beverage, and on the third floor is going to be the Elixir concept, which is the lounge, meant to be when you're done eating on the second floor, you go upstairs for a dessert, cocktail, music, dancing, so that you can have the entire nightlife experience from dinner to drinks all in one place without having to go anywhere else. Next slide, please. So here is just a plan of the bar on the second floor. So to give a little bit of context here, it's actually at the southwest corner of the second floor terrace. And as proposed, I was a little bit surprised to hear Ms. Tackett say it would be highly visible as designed, with the bar back going up above the bar counter level, because the way we've designed it and pushing it all the way up to the walls or the doors that lead out to the terrace, we don't believe it would be visible at all. And as a matter of, from Lincoln Road, and as a matter of fact, I believe that's the only actual technical requirement in the code, is that when you have an outdoor bar counter, it not be visible from the street. And so the way we've designed it, it's a small bar, total of 10 seats. You'll see 9 chairs and the space for a handicap at the far left end or the south end of the bar. Next slide, please. So here's an elevation of the bar from the front. You'll notice that over the bar is actually going to be built into the trellis essentially a cover for the bar that does not retract the way that it does on the rest of the terrace, so that the bar itself will always be covered. And you'll notice just the design there, and I'll give you a better rendering on the next slide, the way that it's set up. And here you go. This is just about the best way to see it and to picture it. It's inside to the interior of the terrace, to the point where it wouldn't be visible from anybody walking up and down Lincoln Road. We have some site diagrams to show that towards the end of our presentation, but this also gives you a general idea of the design of the terrace and the restaurant itself, just really going for the highest class experience here, which is something that we really wanted to bring to Lincoln Road and to Miami Beach. Next slide, please. So our next request, besides the bar counter, is the retractable trellis. As you know, especially having, gone through the pandemic and COVID kicking up again, one of the biggest things, that you're seeing with restaurants is outdoor dining. And so it's a very, very important component of the restaurant to be able to have as much outdoor dining as possible on this terrace. And as we know, it rains a lot on Miami Beach. It gets extremely hot, and this trellis is meant to bring the protection from those elements that we see, to ensure that we have the ability to seat patrons outside at all times the restaurant's open. Staff has recommended in their conditions that we set back the trellis, I believe 5 feet from the northernmost edge of the restaurant. And I'll mention that by doing that, that actually accounts for slightly over 28 seats, so almost 30% on the second floor and 28% of the seats on the terrace on the third floor. That would have to be removed, and would be a significant impact on the ability of the restaurant to generate revenues through the outdoor dining component. And so we have suggested some mitigating factors to hopefully allow us to keep that trellis to go all the way to the edge of that north point on the terrace. Next slide, please. And so this is the third floor. We believe on the third floor it's so far set back that even if the trellis goes all the way up to the edge of the terrace on the third floor, it wouldn't have the same visibility impact. And so we believe it's really more about the second floor that concern really is about the visibility of the trellis structure from Lincoln Road. Next slide, please. And so here's a rendering with the trellis if it's completely closed from the second floor. One of the things we're proposing is creating essentially a green screen of plants on that edge that would grow up slightly to block a majority of the visibility of the terrace from the points closest to the south side of Lincoln Road. But also I'll mention, with regard to the seating plan, we would be placing booths like sofa style that would be facing in towards the restaurant. So the goal here isn't to be able to have patrons walk all the way up to the edge, look out on Lincoln Road. the point is to screen it from Lincoln Road. Nobody's going to be coming to that edge, having a drink and looking down on Lincoln Road. This is not meant to be, a Bourbon Street style balcony. This is meant to be blocked from visibility. Patrons aren't going to be looking down, nor do they want anybody looking up at the patrons sitting and eating there. Next slide, please. So here is the visibility diagram to show we have 3 angles from people standing on the south side, the middle, and the north side of Lincoln Road looking up. And frankly, whether it's set back 5 feet or not, you're going to see the edge of that trellis above the first floor. As far as the third floor trellis, you're not really seeing that from any angle. You'll notice that the visibility does kind of show it, but I'll show you another picture later on based on what is actually there on Lincoln Road with some structures in the center of Lincoln Road and all the trees. Frankly, you don't see the facade at all from the north side of Lincoln Road. So that also helps ensure that there's not much issue with the visibility of the trellis structure when people are looking from a better angle to try and see what's up there. Next slide, please. And so these are some pictures from Lincoln Road in the front. You'll notice the picture on the right is looking at the facade of the Sephora building where this venue is going to go, and with everything going on Lincoln Road, you can't even see through it all. From the left, you'd be looking straight up, so you might see the edges, which would essentially be in line with the existing roofing of the neighbor. And we'll note that next door to the east is Mila Restaurant, which also has its own terrace and I believe trellis or covered area of outdoor as well. Can I just have maybe a couple more minutes? All right, next slide, please. All right, so some more renderings of what the visibility would look like with the plants at the front edge and how much of that trellis you'd actually see from that point and how it essentially aligns with the height of the neighboring buildings more or less. Next slide, please. Yeah. So just in conclusion, if we look at the staff's recommended order, they do say that we meet the requirements of the code and that they recommend approval with the conditions. We would just specifically ask to modify 2 of those conditions, IC1A, which is specifically the 5-foot setback for the trellis, as well as IC1C, which is the height of the back bar for the bar counter. Again, as we believe that even as proposed and designed, because of how set back south on the terrace it is, you would not see that at all from the Lincoln Road. And if you have any questions for me or any technical questions for the rest of our team here, and we'll save the rest for answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. We'll ask the board members to put forward any questions they might have and then ask you to hear them out, and then you can address them all together.
Sure.
Anybody? Ray?
My only question is, I went there, I looked it all over. Right next door, you have a restaurant, Mila, I think it's named. Their floor level is halfway between your second and third level, and there's one area that's not even closed off. You can just look right over onto the roof right now. Have you made any contact with Mila to see how they're thinking about this plan? Because the last thing you want to do is have fights between restaurants.
So I'll actually defer to
wait.
principal.
Don't answer that now. That's later on.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my only concern, and I do agree with the setback.
Thanks, Ray. Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm just wondering, I don't know if anyone can answer this question because it's a little bit outside of the scope of this particular project, but I'm wondering with regard to these sort of structures on Lincoln Road and the neighboring structures, is there any sort of a standard about setbacks and height allowances of what's actually there?
So there are overall height regulations. Lincoln Road is 50 feet. In terms of standards, in what's adjacent, it's an appropriateness decision. So we go by the certificate of appropriateness criteria. In terms of there's an overall maximum height, and then we look at the certificate of appropriateness criteria to determine whether or not something, can be approved. That's what this board would do.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
It was relating to I remember when this project came up. I was on the board when this first came up, and it was we were very excited that this was replicating to such a degree the beautiful facade that had been there in the past. It didn't quite have the depth, but it had a lot of the lines. I was wondering how you guys came up with the 5-foot setback. Is that a standard number, or was that based on sightlines, or?
So it's partially based on sightlines. We believe it will still be somewhat visible. I think their line of sight study is highly misleading that they put up. That's in your package. Their line of sight is not going to the parapet of the building, the solid portion of the building. So I think everything in terms of within probably the first 10, 15 feet is going to be visible, including the bar. I think the 5 feet is just giving a little bit of relief so that it's not, as much of an adverse impact. We do think, if you look at Mila, you can see their canopies. I think they came to this board at least twice to get their setbacks just right. And I think it is important for the character of the street not to have these kind of overwhelming. When the board approved the project in 2015, one of the redeeming qualities of the building was that step back. So I think by bringing things, even though they're much lighter than a solid building would be, too far kind of undermines that original design concept.
Any other questions? Okay. Would you like to perhaps respond to the initial ones?
Sure.
Welcome.
Can you hear me? Okay. Mr. Bressling, thank you for your question. So the owners of Mila actually we're friends. I'm from Paris. They're from the south of France. We've been knowing each other for quite some time. They're very well aware of my project, and the idea here is because they already have plans on this wall that you're talking about. We're going to actually put some plants as well to just screen, their place and my place. Oh, absolutely, because out of respect for their clients, you don't want their client to look down to my restaurant, and same thing for my clients to look up to the restaurant. So it is well, talked between us to make sure that we screen this area to make sure that the clients don't have a view. Absolutely.
And I'll also add on that second floor terrace, on either side, the east and the west, it is just a straight wall that goes up essentially the full height of that second to third floor, almost, if not at least up to the ceiling level. And I have some pictures here, not in the presentation, but if you do want to see them looking at the Mila side, it's kind of small, but I can come around. You can see what the wall looks like on the south, and on the north, it's as far back to go. And that's what it looks like on the Mila side. So again, where the bar back would go. Where the bar back would go, and this is looking at the Mila side.
So there's one thing to really take into consideration. The edge of the terraces are actually pretty deep. They're like around 4 feet deep. So it's not like, the actual client has the terrace just next to it. It's really, you're really deep into it. And that's very important to consider.
And I'd also like to pull up, if we can pull up to slide 15.
We saw the presentation
Oh,
already.
no, this was not actually part of the presentation. It's some extra slides there that show Mila next door to give you guys an understanding of how it relates to what has been previously approved and is there operating next door.
Okay, how much time do you need for that?
Just 15 seconds.
Okay.
Just the next slide, please. Yeah, so this kind of just shows the elevation of the second floor of Mila and how the terrace was approved. It's not a very, we pulled it from their approved plan, so it doesn't really show how far set back their trellis is. Let me see, it might be in one of the next slides, but you know what, the next slide, please. Yeah, so one more. Thank you. So this just kind of shows what Mila had on the south, and they're actually on Meridian, so you could even go straight down Meridian and look up that way, whereas we're more into Lincoln Road, so it's a little more difficult to go farther back and look up beyond what's at the north end. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective between what was already approved with Mila next door to the east and what we're asking for on the top.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shall we do disclosures and public comments?
Yes.
Anyone have anything to disclose? No?
We received an email from the applicant.
Right. Okay.
Well,
from the applicant's lawyer, Debbie, do you want to call for the public?
If there's any members of the public on Zoom or in the audience, please come forward. Seeing none.
Okay. You guys can have a seat if you'd like. Board member comment.
I have one comment. It could have been a question, but it came to me too late. Is when it is raining and they do close the roof over the trellis, do they know exactly how and where the water is going to drain? Because right now you can see that the terrace has drains, and then there are, I guess they're called like scupper holes out on the building. But if it's going to be falling right on the trellis, is it going to go to the buildings on either side? It looks like on the Mila side, or I mean, is it? I'm just raising this as something that maybe that should have been considered and wasn't. I don't have the answer. Maybe the drainage is not going to be affected at all, but it looks to me like it might.
We can answer that.
We're just doing comments right now, so you guys can refrain.
Okay.
Any other comments? Ray?
If the trellis on the second level goes all the way to the front, where is there room for plantings? I mean, it seems with a 5-foot setback, you've got lots of room to put plantings. And, you know, like Sephora's enjoyed a long time of there they are, and there's nothing above them, and now all of a sudden they're going to have something right out to the very edge. And I just want to know that those plantings really are going to make a difference. I really don't also believe that 5 feet difference is going to make a difference in 23 seats of seating, but that's what you said.
Is this comments?
Comments, yeah.
This is board comments. So, I mean, I like the idea of reinvigorating Lincoln Road, and these sorts of projects I think are nice, that they add additional activation spaces and new experiences to Lincoln Road. I think part of the allure and elegance of this building design is John referred to, as a step back component, and it is streamlined, it is very clean. And I mean, I don't have any objections to the third floor system. Obviously, that's where the building is stepped back, but I agree with staff's concerns as far as a setback is concerned. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity to take baby steps with the setback, and you know, if there's no concerns with the intensity. But I mean, to me, when I was first reviewing this, I felt like 11 feet tall, 5 feet setback didn't really seem like that much to me to mitigate or moderate the visual impact. So I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. I think to me that's already being pretty liberal in terms of, I mean, we already know that it's not going to be invisible from the facade view. We know that it's going to be visible. We're just trying to moderate it from what staff said, and I agree with that.
If there are no more comments, or John, do you have something to add?
I agree with Kirk on this and with staff. Having spent time in Mila, I know the advantage of having the plants in the front, and also kind of just the way these sharp white structures would kind of, I think if they really went right up to the facade of the building, they would become part of that facade, which is basically a black and white facade. So pushing them back, having space, the Mila space works great. They do not use every single square foot that goes out to the edge of their systems, and I'm not sure the third floor matters as much. So I would be okay if we said the third floor could go to the edge, but the floor above the facade would have to step back as staff recommends. But that would just be, that's where I'm right now.
Thanks, John. Would anybody care to?
The only other point is I do believe that the bar could be left the way it was designed. I don't have any problem with having the taller part behind with the lamps and everything, and that's all covered. I thought with the way that sets back and everything, if that was an interior space and that was a glass wall, you'd be able to see it anyway. But I don't honestly think you would be able to see that. So I would like to make a motion that we have we accept the plan as it comes with a 5-foot setback on the second level, no setback on the third level, and leave the bar as it was originally designed.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, any other discussion, or should I call the roll? Let me call the roll. Ms. Weinstein-Berman?
Yes.
Mr. Reed? Yes. Mr. Pascal?
Yes.
Ms. Liebman?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Mr. Breslin? Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much easier than
Thank
the
you
last one.
all. That concludes the agenda this afternoon. If there's nothing else, we can make a
I'd like to just take a moment, if I could, to thank Nancy and Kirk for their service and guidance and leadership and friendship. When I got here, they're the last two of the ones when I got here, and so I've had the opportunity for a bunch of years now to look up to you guys, and I really appreciate your commitment to your community, and I think it's a great example for all of us. So thank you for your commitment and your dedication.
All of you, old guys, the new guys, it has been an extreme pleasure. Some of you probably weren't even born when I started this project, so thank you, and I'm going to watch what you do.
I want to say the same. I mean, it's been such a pleasure being on this board, and it always has amazed me from day one how much everyone contributes, how many different perspectives, and how important they all are, and create this balanced consensus. It's really been an amazing experience. The other thing I want to add is I came to this board after a lot of community advocacy, and I just want to mention this because it's sort of part of the reason why I was here was after the designation of the North Beach Historic Districts, and the hope that, obviously you designate historic districts, but that's not the whole job, right? The job is for the historic districts to be successful. And I did want to bring up the point, if I could, that I know from my community standpoint, from the North Beach community, I think there's a lot of confidence in this board. I think that's why there was such widespread support for those historic districts. I don't think that anyone really has the answers for what the future looks like in terms of resiliency and how you promote new development. But I do want to state that there was a tremendous amount of community consensus supporting those districts in North Beach. And so I just want to state that because the community is not always standing here, but the community were very instrumental in that happening. And so I just say this as parting words, just keep that in mind, you know, that I know we always hear from, of course, there's an economic incentives to try to make these districts function, but there's also the love of the authenticity and allure of these districts that you all safeguard. And I know that from being here for 6 years, these answers are not easy. I think pretty much, 90% of these have a struggle component, but it's really important work. And thank you all for the opportunity and for what you're doing and carrying the torch.
Can I ask you a question? On February 1st, you're going to put in what, or how many people are?
Well, currently, and this is subject to change, as always, I believe the City Commission is scheduled to make appointments to Ms. Liebman's seat and Mr. Pascal's seat. If that does not occur, which it may or may not, then both of you are welcome and encouraged to attend the February 14th meeting, if available.
February 14th, that's not bad.
Which is Valentine's Day. I would love to spend my Valentine's Day with you. But we are anticipating appointments being made at the February 1st Commission meeting, but that is subject to the will of the Commission.
Time that it would be?
No, from my understanding, as of now, I don't believe the Commission has set a time certain for the appointments.
Well, that's okay. I'll just sit out there.
Just a quick comment of also what Kirk said about the authenticity and allure of the districts. I want to thank Kirk and Nancy for your authenticity and allure, and I hope to see you guys out at Art Deco weekend. This is my favorite weekend every year. It's where we celebrate our architectural preservation and heritage, and I hope to see all of you out there. And we will not have any conversations that violate government in the sunshine. We'll just have good times together.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, one last order of business, because before I forget, because we did go through a tough call today with this little wood house, and there was the suggestion that we might find a way to avoid structures like this getting to this point where they're beyond repair. And I wonder if, as a board, we might have a recommendation that we could share. Or, Debbie, I wonder if you might guide us on this.
Well, just one thing. I mean, I think there's a lot of different topics in there that we could discuss. At last month's meeting, at the end, we gave you an update on the special magistrate orders for several properties that the city had issued demolition by neglect violations of. We are now much more vigilantly and more proactively keeping tabs on vacant contributing buildings within the local historic districts. We are, planning has been working with the building department and code compliance to start issuing violations and trying in a very proactive manner to get these properties into compliance if they do have what appears to be structural defects or conditions that could result in their demolition. So this is a very difficult subject because this has been going on in our city to one degree or another, certainly since I've been here. But this is the first time, and with great assistance, I need to mention through the city attorney's office and Mr. Stephen Rothstein, have been actively enforcing the demolition by neglect provisions of the code. So that is one positive update. but it's not a perfect. It's not a magic wand either. There's little we can do to force property owners into compliance.
I was just going to recommend that maybe we, when we try to identify those who purchase contributing buildings in historic districts and offer them like a one-page letter of welcome to the historic district, tell them what the resources are, that we're here, because I know that people buy buildings, multifamily buildings, and just don't know, or single-family buildings. But I think if we could get them at the very beginning and give them something, it could be simply presented from the planning board, as a welcome, not as a, but so it gets the ball rolling, so they start to understand that people care about this building that they've just bought, and the district.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting, method to inform and educate and provide information for people. I don't know if there's a way that we can obtain information when properties are sold. The property appraiser does update that information. They don't notify us when they update that information, and there's often a significant lag in when that information is updated. So I don't think there's a way that we could be notified when properties change hands.
When a property is in disrepair, it usually has some violations. So when somebody comes to buy a property, wouldn't they be noticed of the violations? And isn't there a way that we could grab them at that point in time and say, oh, just so you know, and go from there?
That's something we can certainly look into, and you're correct. And I think what is going to be most helpful now is our proactive efforts in issuing those violations, specifically that demolition by neglect violation. Because then typically, anyone purchasing that property, even before they purchased it, would be reaching out to the city attorney's office, to code compliance, and to the planning department, specifically probably to me. So that's something we can think about more. I mean, this is a difficult issue. This is something that's very unpleasant. But I think, Mr. Stewart, your ideas are very good because they're a positive way to try and at least provide the information and make sure everyone knows the regulations and the rules, and that we're all on the same page regarding a contributing building.
And I live in a large condo building, and it would be really helpful if the people who lived in the building knew that when they bought an apartment in the building, it's in a historic district, it's a contributing building to that district, just so they know, because internally to multifamily buildings, they're often dealing with condo boards or they're making collective decisions. So I think it would help.
Absolutely.
If we could, even if it's delayed, it doesn't have to happen the first day they move in. Just as soon as the information gets out there.
How can we turn that into an action?
I think, Debbie, you and I should meet maybe with Steve on how, because I think that the hook is what Ray's suggesting is properties that are in code enforcement proceedings, because those are properties that I think we're aware of. We would have a contact at that point. So we may want to meet internally, Debbie, and maybe bring some thoughts back to the board.
Just say one thing, because I thought what John said was really a wonderful idea because it's positive. And the whole idea is I don't think you want to create this idea because, I mean, there's incentives to having historic buildings, and I don't know that I think it would be a great idea to create a process where you're only publicizing or talking about violations and overlooking the whole idea of saying, wow, you're in a historic district, this district is amazing, and this is what you can get because you're a historic structure. I just don't know if there's a mechanism for doing that, if there's a way of asking the property appraiser if they could export, like, sales or whatever, periodically, where you could get a notification and then just do a mail merge kind of.
Everybody else seems to get the information. Like, welcome new resident.
We can discuss. I can discuss that with the city attorney's office and see what options there may be for that, and we can bring that back to you next month. Because I agree. I mean, that's a really positive way to. Nancy, did you have something?
I wanted to talk about something that has a relationship to this.
Okay, well, just to wrap that up, we'll circle and bring something back to you with hopefully some different options of what could be done potentially.
No, I just wanted to bring your attention, since you'll never see me again. But on Sunday, I think it's a week from now, coming Sunday, on the 15th, is that the date? Is it 15th? MDPL and all us MDPL people left. They should have been the ones announcing this. But anyway, I'm going to be one of the speakers that day, and I'm going to talk about my long-term ability to do all of this for so many years. And it's just about a half hour. It's not a whole big...
And that will be at the Art Deco Welcome Center on Ocean Drive?
Yes, exactly.
What time?
At 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
I don't know what's before and what's after. I
Okay.
only know what's it. And I would love to see all of you, even you, Stuart. Okay. That's all I have to say. And I'm going to miss you.
We'll miss you. Okay, with that, we can adjourn.